When you're building something worth bragging about, whether it's a resto mod, a track toy, or your next garage masterpiece, there's no shortcut to doing it right, and doing it right starts with the equipment you can trust. That's where the Millermatic 211 Pro comes in. This machine is built for long days in the shop, delivering both MIG and flux cord welding performance you can count on. With USB enabled upgrades, auto set feature, a higher duty cycle, a 15-foot MIG gun, and dense connections, it's engineered to keep you welding all day, every day, with no drama or downtime, just results. It's compact, it's tough, and it's ready for the moment you flip the switch. So if you're serious about building stronger, cleaner, and faster, check out the Millermatic 211 Pro at millerwelds.com or hit up your nearest Miller distributor today.
Welcome to another episode of the Strange Motion Wave podcast. As Mercury sneezes, I am your host, Tim Strange, along with
Mercury and Carrie.
And Axel is right over there. Tonight we have an industry icon. We don't say that very often. In the 70s, he worked at a Hollywood photography studio. He has shot Elizabeth Taylor, Cher, Burt Reynolds, Linda Carter, Raquel Welch, even shot presidential pictures for Ronald Reagan, easy for me to say. Started a hot rod in the 80s, worked for Carcraft, Motor Trend, GM, Ford, and Chrysler. He was the photographer for the first ever swimsuit edition of Hot Rod. And one of the coolest stories, he married that girl and is still married to her. She'll pop up on the screen up here.
Well, we'll
still
show.
Married to her. He's got a cool story about flying in an airplane or a helicopter and landing at a drag strip with Linda Vaughn. He also shot the highest selling hot rod magazine ever, the one with Cadzilla and ZZ Top. A couple years ago, we had the pleasure of inducting him in the Starboard National Rod and Custom Car Hall of Fame under the journalist photographer section. Welcome tonight, Randy Lorentzen.
Ta-da! Thanks, guys. Thanks for dragging me along, and thanks for dragging me into the Hall of Fame too. That's still one of my high points,
Yeah, it's cool. We're doing that this year. It's going to be October 17th. We'll send out invitations to try to. We always like to invite past Hall of Fame inductees to come back to the party, which is it's now at the Museum of American Speed in Lincoln, Nebraska.
Oh,
yeah. Last year was our first time there, so it's going to stay there for the eternity because all the kiosk and all the Hall of Fame display stuff is there.
Bitchin'. Yeah, I've never been there.
Yeah. It's amazing.
So I have to put on your calendar for October 17th.
Okay. A couple days after my dad's birthday. I'll remember that.
So a couple days before Carrie's birthday.
That's right. We'll have to have cake.
Yep. So before we get into all of this that I said, you've had an amazing career. Let's go back to little Randy, like high school. How did you get into this stuff?
Well, actually it was in high school. My folks got divorced not long before high school started. And that was actually what kind of helped lead to this too. In fact, there's my very first high school photo teacher right there in that photo. Anyway, my dad drove a truck for a towing company that they were basically, towing semis that were wrecked or whatever. And their largest client was Greyhound Bus and Greyhound Bus Lines here in LA. And when I was a kid, he'd, wake me up in the middle of the night. Hey, there's a bus broken down here. There's a truck crashed or whatever up on the grapevine. You want to come with me? And I'd go ride with him in the truck all the time, and growing up from the time I can remember doing that with him. And then when I got into high school, with my folks separated off, we were surfing more than we were at school. And we were just ditching school incessantly, and because mom thought I was with dad, dad thought I was with mom. And so there was an opening here. And the first high school that I went to, I didn't want to be there at all. It was not a fun place. And so, the surf clique, the guys that I hung with, we wouldn't come to school for days at a time, surfing, especially if it was a swell. And then we started getting better and better at BSing our way back into school and finding ways to make them think it was all legitimate. And it finally came to a peak once when the boys' dean dragged me in and he said, you know what really pisses me off about you is he grabbed me by the shirt collar. He says, I know you're lying to me. I know these notes are on, I know these phone numbers are unreal. I know. And he said, if you'll just be, honest, just be a man, be honest, So, okay. And he said, I'll just let you be truant. Just come and tell me you were truant. Okay. Well, we didn't go to school for 31 days, myself and a couple other guys. We took off to Mexico and went surfing, sleeping on the beach. Came back and he wanted us dead, and again, pulling you up on the desk by the shirt collar. But so it was, I got kicked out, got expelled, got sent to a little reformatory kind of clean you up with all the gangbangers and the pregnant girls. And so now I'm way behind in high school. And my dad, we'd gone off on one of these things with the buses, with the Greyhounds, and he would always say, "We'll run through the bus." When the bus would break down, no matter where it was in California, Arizona, whatever, they sent another Greyhound to transfer all the people on and take off. And he'd send me into the truck, go look through the bus, make sure nobody's forgot a purse or their books, or you'd find stuff every time, a little handbag or small suitcase or something, and we'd turn it into, they're lost and found there at the Greyhound offices. And so one time he's going through and he found this Nikon camera, which neither of us had any idea what that was. We were Polaroids and brownies like everybody else in, middle America. And so turned it in, and he kept referring to it as this cheap Japanese slide camera. And he turned it into the guys at Lost and Found found this cheap Japanese slide camera. And after 30 days, if nobody claims it, they'd call him all the time. Hey, you want that purse, or you want that, that Kurt Vonnegut book that we found, or whatever the thing is. And they did the same. And they gave him the camera. And now I'm in trouble at school. And he says, why don't you take a class? I was doing okay with my art classes and things. Take a class and learn how to use this thing. Maybe you can get a decent grade. So, okay, can't be too hard. And I mean, I had no interest, no, inkling, no nothing. And the first day of school, back at another new high school that they sent me to, my senior year, I mean, everybody knows this. When the first day of school and you're sitting there in class and you start checking out, coming in and out the doors, who's the pretty girls and who it is, you got to get to know them further in the classroom. And this girl walks in, this little blonde, and she's wearing a mini skirt and long like surf, beach blonde hair at the time. And we're just thinking, my buddy and I, they're in this class together in the same boat. Wow, who's she? And she writes her name up on the chalkboard, Miss Robin Bernezra. And it's like, oh my God, this is the teacher, you know? And so literally thought, well, this is cool. You got a pretty girl for a teacher. She's talking about she just turned 21. Well, we just turned 17. This can't be too far off. And she shows us the dark room where the print lab is. Well, I've never been in anything like this. And then she showed us the film processing room, which is pitch black. And there's an exhaust fan in there for the chemical smells. And thinking, she's here and she's hanging out in the dark, and we could be hanging out in the dark. And when she's not here in the dark with us, there's an exhaust. We could smoke a joint in here and blow it up into the exhaust fan. That nobody will know that we're in here, because the smell of the weed will get carried away. And we thought, we're 17 years old. We got this figured out. And at the time, they allowed what they called IO classes. If you were just nowhere near getting to college, you could go take auto shop twice a day, or metal shop, or wood shop, whatever, and learn how to be one of those things, and then go off later in the afternoon to a shop to work at and have employment. So I asked her right away. I said, "So can I do IO for industrial occupations for photography?" Just thinking, I got this figured out. And sure, yeah, we meet. Well, then the school said no. So she went in and fought the good fight. Said, "What's wrong with being an artist? Why do you have to turn a wrench?" And then they changed their minds, and she actually got me interested in photography. So I had total ulterior motives. I wasn't thinking someday I'll grow up to be a photographer. I was just thinking I get to hang out with girls in the dark room. And and then eventually realized, well, gosh, if you know how to do this at all, the prettier girls at school want to get their pictures taken for one thing or another. It's a great way to meet the girls, you know. And there's a little studio in the back, and there was this one girl that was part of the surf clique named Mary Collins, who eventually became Bo Derek, and I used to shoot with her at high school all
Oh,
the time, you know.
wow.
And so we were taking pictures in the back of the class. I mean, this is jumping ahead in time, but at the time, the last couple months of school, she had this old dude that kept dropping her off in this big black sedan, you know, whatever it was at the time, big fancy car. And he had gray hair. It was like he, you know, he must have been 30 or something. You know, we were like that old dude, you know, who is that old son of a bitch dropping you off at school? And who is this guy? Oh, he's going to make me a movie star. We're like, yeah, right, 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 right. And she kept telling me that in the photo class after school, shooting photos. And no, I'm going to quit school. He's going to make me a movie star. And sure as hell, she dropped out of school 2 months before graduation, you know, went off to make a movie called Orca, which none of us knew. We just thought she was gone. And then, you know, a year or so later, 10 comes out, you know, it's like, oh my God, that's Mary, you know, now named Bo. And again, jumping forward, when you're talking about working in the Hollywood studios, that when I worked at Langdon Studio, Harry Langdon's, and it was Anne Margaret, and then tomorrow is going to be, you know, Cher, and the next day is so and so and so. Every day it was like that for 2, 3 years, and we shot a lot with Anne Margaret, and she had this assistant that worked for her that had been with her in high school, and they decided to be a star and the star's assistant, you know, from the get go, which they achieved. And so her Norma, her assistant, kept asking me, you know, eventually they're in the makeup room working with Anne Margaret. And what did you do? Where did you grow up? And how did you get into this? And da 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 da. And I start telling her stories, and she goes, "Oh my God, Randy, you're Randy." That, and I went, "Oh my God, Norma, you're Mary's mom." And yeah, and it's Bo's mom. And I suddenly realized it because I'd been to parties in high school at their house, you know, when she was still Mary. And and that's how she Anne Margaret had hooked her up with John Derek. And then this whole thing goes off and gone, you know. And had to go dig up my old high school photos of Bo Derek for her. Anyway, that's a big jump in time, but you know, again, it all got started because of my dad finding this camera. You know, we took it to a camera store and said, you know, what kind of film do you even buy? What do you even do with this thing? You know, and because it wasn't the stuff you got at the drugstore, you know. And the guy said, "You want to sell it?" You know, and my dad was like, you know, it's just a cheap Japanese slide camera. And at the time, I guess a new one probably cost 800 or $1,000. And he offered
Wow.
my dad close to that. And my dad was like, what? What? You know, I mean, what? And he's, no, well, maybe, you know, Randy, you go learn how to use this thing. So we bought a roll of Kodachrome and took pictures at a carnival and got them developed. And, you know, you're holding up the slides, looking at them afterwards, and never seen anything like that, you know? And it was just amazing, the color. And I thought this could be fun. And like I say, so it started into the high school photo class. Again, thinking nothing but maybe it's a good way to meet pretty girls. That's all my
It
ultimate
worked. We'll
goal
talk about it,
was.
but it worked out for you. It
Yeah,
did work
yeah,
out for you. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
You know, the stuff with cars and hot rods, never thought of it. My dad raced. My dad and his buddies all had race cars. I grew up with the, you know, at Ascot Raceway with him all the time, or at Lions Drag Strip. And there was hot rods in the neighborhood. And, you know, it was the 60s,
So
man.
he
It was
he did
muscle
drag
cars everywhere.
cars.
No, he did dirt track stuff, you
Okay.
know, and he did even back in the old days of figure 8 racing, and then jalopy races and all kinds of that stuff, you know. And but we, you know, like I say, muscle cars galore in the neighborhood, and the guy across the street had a 34 coupe, and you
Mhm.
know, I mean, a good friend had a 39 Deluxe, and we just it was just normal. And there was hot rod
Mhm.
magazines laying everywhere, Rod and Custom laying at everybody's house. Never occurred to me to ever take pictures and try to do something with that, you know,
So
just
so as you're a high school surfer boy, did you have any mode of transportation, or were you bumming rides, or what was your first
Oh no,
wheels?
yeah, yeah. Well, my first couple of cars were Corvairs. My dad loved Corvairs for some
Yeah,
stupid
she's got a
reason.
Corvair.
Oh yeah. Oh, that's right. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
He was crazy. He bought my mom a new one, at one point, and then years later got me first two were used. In fact, the first one, it was a 60, and it was so rusty. One day, one of the guys climbing in the back seat to go surfing really early in the morning. He stepped in and kapoom, and he was standing on the driveway underneath the car. So it was always just a good spot to throw a rubber floor mat on it. And if there's a policeman behind you, there's always a place to throw something out of the car that you might need to throw out of the car. And and the second one was a better car, but eventually, I he got me a Nova Super Sport, and then I had a 49 Pontiac panel truck or panel wagon, you know,
Mhm.
that was sort of a hot rod that I worked on here and there at the time. That was instant, instant red lights in your rearview mirror back in those days in the early 70s. The cops, we got pulled over incessantly, and get out, search the car, search you, get out. And so finally got rid of that thing because it was more trouble than it was worth. But it was always just, again, surfing. The guys, everybody and their brother had a VW Bug or a VW Bus. I wanted to get a van, but my folks were dead set against that because they didn't want to be grandma and grandpa back then and get that whole thing going. But they always, there was cars everywhere, in the neighborhood. When I got my driver's license, my dad went and rented a new big block Mustang and brought it home to teach me how to do burnouts in front of the house and how to power shift and how to match the RPM and all those. I mean, and it's just what everybody kind of did. It was completely normal. So we were always around the car things, going to car shows, and seeing Ed Big Daddy Roth cars back in those days and Starbird cars back in those days and Barris and stuff. It was everywhere. You know.
Yeah, that was the time to be. So this was what year was this about?
The car shows and stuff. Or well,
Yeah, then when you were in high school, when did you graduate?
I graduated in 74, so now I'm giving away
Okay.
my age. So yeah, they were, but growing up in the 60s in Southern California and all the guys on the block were, 2, 3, 4 years older than me. So I was running with them all the time. And then, again, the surf crew at the beach, that was a whole life and world unto itself. But it's still, everybody had the cars around the neighborhood, you know.
Yeah, that of course we've seen that in the movies, but that surf Southern California lifestyle is so far removed how we grew up in
Oh yeah.
cornfield country, Midwest Illinois.
Yeah, I can't
It's
even
like,
imagine.
yeah, only seen that in movies, and I never thought I'd even go to California. Being a BMXer and into cars, I always thought I had to move to Southern California to do BMX. When I figured out I wasn't good enough to be a pro, and then I just kind of made it work and didn't move. So now I don't know if you could pay me enough to live in California. So
Yeah, my
yeah, I'm
my
sure I
daughter,
could.
in fact,
Yeah.
at one point when she was growing up, her and my son were still little, and we were watching Fast Times and we're at Ridgemont High, and she said, "Dad, were you Spicoli? Are you Spicoli?" I said, "No, I'm not Spicoli, but I knew 100 Spicolis. Everybody was a Spicoli."
That's awesome.
That's great.
Ah.
So you get out of high school. What was next for you?
Well, I went to work for a skateboard company, and myself and the crew, the guys that we all grew up and ran with together. And
What
so
company was that?
it was called Palavan. We made skateboards for Peralta, and we made the Logan Earth skis were the big thing that we made. And we
Because
made them.
we were friend with Gil Losi, and he
Oh,
was
really?
part of Veriflex.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
And
this
then
is
his
the flexible boards were just starting to kind of come on because in
Mhm.
'74 there and stuff, the Logan Ersky kicktails were one of the boards to have, and then we were making wheels with Stacy Peralta and gosh, who were some of the other guys? Some of those the Z Town
Mhm.
guys and stuff out of Santa Monica, and they were selling and Tony Alva and that stuff, and but most everything we made was wood and kicktails. But again, we all eventually, you're all 18 years old, 19 years old at most, and you're working with heavy machinery, cutting and sawing and grinding. Everybody gets hurt, gets a couple stitches, gets a cast, gets this and that. And one of the guys that I grew up with, and my dad, his dad were best of friends, and there were three brothers that I grew up with that since kindergarten. We were all best friends, and one of them worked there with us, with the skateboards. And I was standing on one machine working, and he was on a table saw next to me cutting the kicktails, and the board wedged and caught his hand and dragged his left hand down into the blade and cut his fingers off. And when you're
Oh,
18 years old and you see that happen right next to you,
yeah.
it makes a mark in your life.
Yeah, my dad ripped the thumb off in a farming accident when I was
Oh,
14. So yeah.
oh, yeah. Well, at least a thumb's almost even worse, but it was horrible, and all of us quit. We'd all gotten hurt here and there, but it's like, no, no,
Mhm.
now that scared the living crap out of all of us.
Mhm.
It's time to grow up, boys, and go find something to do. It's,
Safer.
yeah, there's no longer just trying to get by and surf all day. And it's like, it's time to grow up. And we all had that same kick in the ass. And so,
So were you
and
doing any photography for the skateboard company at that time, or
no,
just working in the
no.
shop?
It was still something I'd do here and there for fun at
Mhm.
concerts or shooting a girl or something. And but just working at skateboards. And then I started going after that happened and going to a trade school here in LA to learn photography, and that didn't go well, at all for me once again. And so I went for a half a semester or so and quit. And so I thought, well, I know how to learn by doing much more than sitting and having somebody, read you a book. And so I went into Hollywood, and I figured photographers must be in Hollywood. I don't know why I thought that, but that must be where they are. And I started paying attention in magazines as to the names in the magazines, the photo credits, and thinking, okay, I'd like to learn how to do that. And so I went into Hollywood, went into a phone booth back in those days with the yellow pages there, and there was probably
Kids
about that.
nowadays don't even know what the yellow pages
Yeah.
are. They have no
Yeah,
idea.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there was the big yellow book with everything. But anyway, probably a half an inch thick of pages of photographers, you know. So I tore all those out, went home and categorized them as to here's all the photographers are on Sunset Boulevard in Hollywood, and start at this address and end at this address, and put them all in order, and did the same with Hollywood Boulevard, and here's all the photographers, and all the big streets there, Santa Monica Boulevard, and went would every day just start down the street again to each one and knock on their door and say, you looking for any help? I mean, I'll sweep floors, I'll clean chemical tanks, whatever you need. I just got to learn. And finally got hired, and a woman hired me. And then there's sort of a subculture to photography with at least there was then. It was a large subculture. There probably still is in some ways, of people assisting and getting into photography and there was a whole crew of guys that were like, and now you're trying to work your way up this photo assistant ladder to make it into the bigger studios and the best of the people that were out there at the time. You might be making $3 an hour or $4 an hour. And hell, some of the best photographers I ever worked for, I got up to the point where you made $65 a day. That was huge. And so learn from, like, some of the best that LA had to offer. Again, shooting women, shooting people. It's all I wanted to do. And then after working at Langdon Studios, went to work with other photographers that were there, that were doing not quite his level of work, but were trying to, and they'd pay me big money to come in and do Harry Langdon lighting. you know. So that got me going and kept me alive for a while. And
So Langdon is the studio that you shot
right.
all those that we mentioned earlier, all
Yeah,
like
yeah, that was at Langdon Studios. And I mean, every day it was fantastic. It was, and processing film on site, printing on site, hair and makeup people that at that time were making $3,000 to $4,000 a day each. And the celebrity makeup people that you would see on Good Morning America or whatever,
Mhm.
and it was fantastic.
So
But
you also, before we went on, I asked you because I thought this, that you even worked like not taking pictures, but an assistant. You worked at Playboy for a little bit, right? Or
yeah, well, yeah,
free,
working with.
were they pretty much just freelances for all those
Oh
studios
yeah,
like that?
everything was freelance,
Okay.
everything, and it was always freelancing. And then my first wife was a makeup artist, and when I was too young and too stupid to realize I shouldn't be getting married, but and that didn't work out. But it was the one thing that was good about it was that since she was a makeup artist, we started shooting that kind of stuff ourselves, and we could with just two checks coming home because the difficult thing about doing that, I mean, you learn an enormous amount about lighting, you know, photographing shapes, especially for women. I hate to keep harping on that, but there's curves and lines, and how do you accent the positive and eliminate the negatives, and which
Because this was all before Photoshop.
right, there was no Photoshop. You retouch the photos, and there was a guy there at Langdon's that retouched transparencies with a dual stereoscopic microscopic microscope. And he would go in there and retouching on 2 1/4 transparencies, which was like black magic. Like, how do you
Mhm.
scratch the surfaces and take out, crow's feet? And I mean, to learn that kind of stuff was incredible. But the the downside of that work was that there's 8 kabillion guys that want to be out there shooting pretty girls all day, so it's
Mhm.
hard to work your way up that ladder, and you can work pretty cheap for a while getting yourself going and starting to get some name and a little bit of recognition and stuff. And it was we were doing okay. It was a struggle. We were living at the beach and surfing as much as I could, and but you're competing with a large group of people.
Mhm.
But my brother-in-law from that first marriage changed my life, and he was a hot rod guy, and he had a Model A coupe, or a Model A Roadster actually, when I first met her, and so he and I hit it off. We're still good friends, still best of friends. It's kind of a big brother to me. But I mean, just a sequence of events that goes on. First, this teacher changes my life and gets me truly interested in something, and then Dan Carter, he I started going back out again a lot to all the hot rod events. My dad had moved off, and I got back into that whole scene, going to whatever shows were going on, or cruise nights and that sort of thing. And we were out at Father's Day, the big LA Roadster show here every year,
Mhm.
and the guy had shown up with this Model A Phaeton, this 29 Model A Phaeton at the time, that just blew everybody's socks off. And Fat Jack had a lot to do with the build on the car and stuff, and we knew him. And Danny was doing pretty good at the time, and he was doing everything he could to buy that car, you know. And he offering the guy more and more and more money, and buying him more and more beer, and buying everybody else more and more beer, trying to talk this guy into selling that Phaeton. And he just wouldn't do it. And so finally, Danny goes, "Well, what's the problem? I mean, come on, what's it going to take?" And he goes, "So, well, to be honest," this guy's name was Joel. He said, "I've got to tell you, Gray Baskerville approached me from Hot Rod Magazine, and they're going to shoot the car. He wants to photograph the car for Hot Rod Magazine, and I'm going to keep it until it's in Hot Rod Magazine, you know." And then my buddy Danny gives me the elbow, boom, like that, and he goes, "Why don't you shoot it?" You know, he said, "Maybe you'll sell me the car." You know, and I said, I could do that. I I think I could do that. I'd never thought of it. So we did. Went down to a place here in Palos Verdes, down by the cliffs at the ocean, and secluded place, and dragged lighting out there to kind of light it as if I was shooting people, and shot the darn thing, and hauled it off to Hot Rod Magazine. You know, and
Is that the Phaeton that pops up in the picture every once in a
yeah,
while?
Yeah, the sort
Okay.
of was actually Jaguar Regency red, deep
Yeah.
maroon color. Yeah, and it
Which,
was the
as
first
I
time I
mentioned, the
ever hot rod.
pictures, your daughter put this together. Like, this is the most awesome podcast visuals that we've had. Yeah.
Well, I learned one thing that I learned doing another podcast was they said, "Can you send photos afterwards?" And I did, and the photos didn't have anything to do with what we were talking about. And on top of that, they had Googled and taken photos that I thought, well, I didn't even take those photos, and some of them
Mhm.
were just, I didn't do that. But anyway, I shot the car. I mean, I'd been to, like you said, to the Playboy offices. I'd gone to New York and worked for Scavullo, doing stuff for Cosmopolitan, and gone over from his place for a while to, oh gosh, what's his name? Um, Avedon Studio, and they're doing Vogue and stuff, and but I didn't want to live in New York, but went to those offices and went to those studios, and none of it intimidated me, or Playboy. That didn't intimidate me. But when I thought, and I got to take these pictures to Hot Rod, it intimidated the hell out of me, you know, because I was familiar with it, and it was like, wow, it was just such a big deal, you know. And so, well, I'll take them up there, and went up
So
to Sunset
you do the
Boulevard.
photo shoot and you just walk into the Hot Rod magazine offices.
Yep. Yep. So,
That's
you
awesome.
know,
Yeah.
I looked up where they were on there, and I'd seen the Peterson building and thought I knew what that was, but I wasn't sure. And it was on Sunset Boulevard. It was right near the Sunset Strip with a lot of other cool stuff. And so I went, and I thought, I'll just drag these pictures up there and wait till somebody will talk to me. And so when I went in and sat there in the lobby at Hot Rod, and told this. I mean, in those days, Hot Rod was like a magazine. They had a huge staff, and it was
So what
receptionists.
year was this when you walked in Hot Rod?
That was 1981. No, 81 or 82.
Yeah, this was Hot Rod was.
King.
I'd say Hot Rod got bigger, but
Yeah.
Hot Rod's at that time it was already
It
almost
was
20
getting
years.
to be the biggest it
Yeah,
ever
the
got.
start.
By the
Yeah,
late
yeah,
80s, it was peaking,
yeah.
Right.
Oh, and it was gigantic. And so, anyway, sat there and it sat with this black dude, shooting the breeze that had a drawing of a pink Cadillac 59 Fin that he had. And what are you
Can I
doing
guess
here?
who that was?
Yes.
Was it
Oh,
Steve Stanford?
it was Steve Stanford,
Oh, that's
you know.
incredible.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Sitting there, and he was doing the
And
same
he
thing.
walked in the offices too the same
Yeah,
day.
yeah,
Yeah.
same day.
Yeah.
We're both sitting there on this little sofa, like waiting our turn. And finally, they called me into the art department, and I brought the photos in, and Leonard Emanuelson was editor at the time, and now he completes the triumvirate of people that changed my life. He's again like, there's my photo teacher from high school. Anyway, he's another big brother to me, and 5, 6 years older than me, and he brought me in through the photos on the light table, all this, Hasselblad 2¼ transparencies, and he goes, "You shot these photos." It's like, yeah, you shot these photos. You know, I'm standing there with, my spiky Rod Stewart haircut and earrings, and it's the 80s, and yeah, yeah, sure. No, in telling and then you can get a hold of this guy to get a story together. Well, yeah, I can tell you how to get a hold of him, you know. And so he made me an offer on the photos that I thought, this guy really wants the photos. He seems to be genuinely interested and kind of digging them here. And he's the editor of Hot Rod Magazine, But I could tell he wanted them. And when he offered me $350 or something, I said, oh, no, it cost me that much just to take the pictures with Hasselblad film and processing and Polaroids and this and that, and just laying it on thick. And okay, how about this? How about this? How about this? And kept pushing him up. And whatever we finally agreed on, $800 or something, And now I lived at the beach, 2-bedroom apartment by myself across the street from surfing, and it was $450 a month. And I thought, damn, wait a minute. If I can shoot this couple of cars a month for this guy, even I I don't need to do a whole lot else just to keep myself alive. I can keep surfing, and I can do this. And so I did. And I thought, this is easy money. Well, well, I don't know if I'd say it's easy money, but it was fun money, There's
Mhm.
not all the drama of the people and my boyfriend did this or now so and so, there was always dramas.
It's still work, skilled work, but go
It
back to
was
younger. It's like there's nobody cutting their fingers off right beside you.
right, right. Well, and like I say, with hair and makeup and models and all this, there's always a little drama somewhere.
I
Somebody's
can't
got
even
something.
imagine
Yeah, I
the
can't.
Yeah,
drama.
and there's always, oh, I hate this outfit. No, well, I love this. Well, and I'm paying for it. I mean, there wasn't any of that. I thought, well, I can do this, and just took it kind of casually, and so right away I said, hey, are you I, there's this big cruise night, you ever go out there and at Angelo's, and it was the big thing in Orange County here at the time. And no, I haven't, but why don't you go shoot it for me? I was like, wow, I just sold this guy my first set of photos and he already gave me another assignment. So I went and I shot at cruise night, and then met Dave Wallace. He was there, shooting too. and
I
and
I met Dave Wallace, which he's been on American Hot Rod Foundation podcast that they don't really do him
yeah, you
anymore.
should get him here.
And I've listened to that probably 10 times. I met him. He was in the NHRA booth at the SEMA show, this
Yeah.
last SEMA show, and I heard his voice because he's got a very distinct voice, kind of like you do. And I'm like, and I walked over and Brian Loans was interviewing him. And I was like, Loans, when they got done, I go, Loans, do me a favor, because I know Loans. And he's like, what? I go, get Dave Wallace to do my podcast, which Loans has been on the podcast. He looks at Dave, he goes, you need to get on Tim's podcast. So it hasn't happened yet. He has my number, but I need to reach out to Loans to get Wallace.
Yeah.
He's got an incredible story. He's
Oh,
a
he's
hell
a
of a
great,
storyteller
yeah.
too. Yeah.
He's been doing it longer than I have even, and he's a leftover hippie. He's a very cool guy, and he's a great guy. But anyway, so we're shooting at the cruise night, and I came back with the film. Lenny says, "Do you think you could make a cover?" And it's like the third time I've talked to the guy. Yeah, I can shoot a cover, so it'll pop up here somewhere. Went out there and gathered a couple cars and had some guys meet us out there. And again, with my brother-in-law, Danny, dragging along, and he had just bought his first BMW at the time. And so he says, I don't even remember what I was driving at the time, but I remember his big BMW we got. And he said, well, let's take the BMW, put all your camera gear and your lights in the trunk of the BMW, and they'll all be hanging out, and we'll strap it all down. And people think, man, this guy's successful. Look, he drives a BMW. Making total idiots of ourselves more than anything. But we went out there and shot the cover, and immediately, again, Lenny's in love with the cover. And he says, well, how did you get started? What do you usually shoot? And told him about shooting girls and shooting women and getting started that way. And he goes, do you know who Linda Vaughn is? And I said, yeah, I know who Linda Vaughn is. And he said, do you think you could get a cover with Linda Vaughn? I said, yeah, I can shoot Linda Vaughn. So that was the next thing, just put me on a plane off to Florida to go see Linda Vaughn and hook up with her to shoot a cover with Warren Johnson and his new, Hurst Pro Stock, Hurst Olds Pro Stock car for 84, I think that was.
Yeah. So
And
that's pretty crazy that you didn't start as like a lower level it's like,
no,
okay, they bought your first one, and then, hey, let's start shooting covers right from the
yeah,
start.
and it caused some trouble actually. Peterson was an empire. It was a huge 7-story building on Sunset Boulevard, right on the Strip, and
Which that's Margie Peterson right there. It just popped up, right?
right,
Was
yeah, and the guy with the plane, that was Mr. Peterson. I still think of them as Mr. and Mrs. But even though I shot them a number of times for things, he'd hire me directly. But at the time, there was there was Carcraft as a step down, and there was the Chevy Performance books and the Mustang books, and and Rod and Custom and those things. But I jumped right at the top of the ladder. The only other thing above it was Motor Trend, and I didn't sort of realize that. And the political empire builders, that are there to some extent. But I got along with everybody. I stayed out of that mess. The only place that I knew I was really causing trouble and getting some really ugly feedback from was the photo department. and a fellow Bob DeLevo that ran the photo department since the 50s there. And suddenly there's these checks going to me rather than to his department. So he did what he could to kind of make that. I was never allowed in a studio or into the labs or anything there in that building, So years later, when I ran the studio and built the studio for Source Interlink Media, when all the magazines were there, he came to see the studio, and he could. In fact, I had him autograph my autograph board here, and because he was so blown away by the studio. But I didn't know, and then later, so I started getting contacted by folks like at McMullen Publishing saying, hey, we saw your name in the Hot Rod. You want to shoot for Street Rodder? And Street Rodder, they paid so poorly compared to what Peterson paid. And then the guys at Argus, I got calls from them, went over and saw them, and ended up shooting them for them a couple times, like with Popular Hot Rodding and some stuff there. But it was like I started at Hot Rod. It was the place to be. And I got as much work just about as I could handle from them, and so I was loving what I did. I loved the guys there. It was a lot of fun. And, how could you not go hang out with Gray Baskerville at Bonneville or something when you had the chance? It was just,
How did Gray Baskerville treat you when you first showed up at Hot Rod?
When I was first there, I thought he was kind of a prick, to be honest with you. He just wanted nothing to do with me.
The first time I met him, he cussed me out.
Did he really?
Yeah. We were at a Hot Rod show in Indy, and Cole Quinnell, which was a freelancer, was scheduled to shoot our car. And I seen Gray, which I was a fan of Gray. And I was like, excuse me, Mr. Baskerville. I was like, do you know where Cole Quinnell is shooting his photo shoots? And he just spun around. How in the F should I know when another photographer's doing his photo shoots? And I was like, oh, okay, nice to meet you too. So
he might have had a few by that point in the day.
yeah. And he was nice to me the next time, but it definitely wasn't the best reaction at first. So
well, yeah. I went in and I asked Len, finally at one point, and I said, I'd really like to kind of get to know Gray Baskerville. It's Gray Baskerville. And I said, he just doesn't like me. He's pretty standoffish. And he goes, he's a little threatened by you. And I said, what? And he said, he considers himself a photographer too, but, they're not doing what you do. And they're just, there's the car, click, 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 and move on. And that's what everybody was doing. And so, I found that unbelievable, because he's Gray Baskerville. So I went to meet him, and I went over to his office and said, I just want to make sure, we, clear the air here. I'm such an admirer of what you've done with Hot Rod for so long. Since I was a kid, it was always a great thing to say. And, and he and I got to be good friends. It was, first time
I heard a story the first time you went to Bonneville with him.
Yeah.
And then he traveled with like a liquor cabinet case, correct?
Yeah. Yeah, he would travel with like this big Foot Locker and a briefcase. And in his briefcase, because he wasn't a businessman, he didn't need
like a Foot Locker, like they drug around in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles movie.
Right, exactly. Except the top opened in two doors, and exactly that kind. And and then the briefcase would be a clean pair of shorts, just short. I don't mean underwear, but shorts, and maybe an extra T-shirt or a golf shirt, and that's it. Toothbrush, toothpaste, and it was in the briefcase. And that cabinet that you're talking about, he'd put it up. The first time I went to Bonneville, they told me hook up with Gray, and he'll show you the ropes and help you get through I'm whatever, 24 years old or something. This is like going to the moon, and he said, meet me over at my room in the morning in this little motel that we were staying in. Guys working in the parking lot building engines. And so I went over to his room, and he has this cabinet sitting on top of the dresser in the motel room and like I say, it's like planes, trains, and automobiles, but it opens from the front like this, and it's liquor shelves and big. I mean, it's like a traveling bar, you know. And what do you want? I said, I'm okay. I'm good. You know. Oh, come on. You know, we're going over to, you're going to be hot over there all day. And I mean, whatever. It's like 7 in the morning or something, you know? No, I don't think so. I'm okay. And then he's standing there, and I was standing there with my, you know, with some, we call them jams, our surf trunks on or something, and a pair of tennis shoes. And he's got his flip flops and his shorts, which, you know, is all he ever wore. And he says, you wear underwear? It's like, what the what's it? I'm in this guy's motel room, and he's asking me if I went, you know, what, what? And I said, what? And he said, do you wear underwear? I said, no. And he says, neither do I. He goes, do this. And he pulls out this big tube of, um, you know, sunblock and goes in his hand. And then he sticks his hand down the front of his shorts and rubs it around real, you know, not gently. And he goes, do that. And I said, no, I don't think so. You know, he goes, do that. No, I don't think so. You know, and, and so, okay, I tried to tell you. And so we went off to the salt, you know. Well, you know, have you been to the salt?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
You know,
sun,
you get
everybody's warned us
sunburned.
the sun bounces off the
Yeah.
salt and comes back
So
up.
you're standing there with big baggy surf trunks on and no underwear, and it bounces off the salt, and you get sunburned places you never that have never seen the sun, you know. And so I
I think I
told
told
you,
you that story because
yeah.
I'd heard that on our podcast. I told her that story the first time we went to Bonneville.
You know. And then you know, another time while we're there, you know, as you know, it's so unreal, and you're unable to judge distance because there's nothing to sort of give you any indicate. So there's this, you know, here's the starting lines, and then off over on the side over there, there's this mountain range. And I thought, it just looks like there's salt, and then straight up there's a mountain. Like, that can't possibly be like that, you know? So I started walking over there, and I just walking and walking and walking. And finally, one of the guys from, you know, from the Bonneville old timers guys that run everything out there comes riding up on this old, you know, rusty bike or a dirt bike, and says, where the hell do you think you're going? I said, I just, when I go over there, he goes, you know, that's about 6 miles away. And he said, you're going to die before you get back, you know. Really, you know, get on the bike, you know, drag you back. So you learn, you know, you don't just wander off into no man's land at Bonneville. You don't you don't resist putting sunblock where you don't think you need it when you don't know what the hell you're doing, you know. I mean, that was Gray. I mean, everybody can tell a million Gray stories because he was, you know, a piece of work, a fun
So
piece
you,
of work.
so how many years were you at Hot Rod doing a lot of stuff with Hot Rod? Kind of like we said, the heyday of Hot Rod.
Yeah, they gosh, I started doing there in 82 or whatever that was, 82 or 83, selling that first set of photos. And I did a lot of work for them up through the mid 90s. And then within that time, I started doing some stuff too with Motor Trend. And you know, things were starting to change in the print world, and the internet was just getting started. But within Motor Trend, eventually Lenny, you know, Leonard Manuelson, he got transferred over from running things at Hot Rod, and he got initially transferred to another division that was called, what was it, the Automotive Performance Group or something. But it was basically Carcraft and all the Chevy magazines and Mustang magazines. Let's go over there and bump these things. Let's get these things going great. So we started doing swimsuit issues for Carcraft because I'd you know, done them for 5 years for Hot Rod, and they sold like gangbusters, you know.
Okay, so we jumped over that. So let's talk about the swimsuit issues.
Okay, where's my better half here? Um, we Pat Ganal was editor at the time. And you know, did you ever get to know Pat? Did you ever meet Pat Ganal?
Yeah, I met him quite a few times, and of course now I'm friends with his son. So
Yeah, he's a great guy. Pat was tough to know, but he was a good guy, and he had very specific likes and
Yep,
don't likes.
there she is.
Hi there.
Yeah.
Hello.
You know,
Hi, how you doing?
so he was talking to me and saying, I think I'm going to do a swimsuit issue because every April they did what was the April Fool's issue, and they would do
Mhm.
something as a joke on the cover or somewhere in the magazine, and whoever was the first to recognize this isn't real, they would win a subscription or something like that. And so he says, well, I'm going to do this. And then you're the guy to do it. And I want to do a swimsuit issue because at the time, Sports Illustrated's gigantically, I mean, it's just,
Mhm.
they're selling millions of copies of the swimsuit. They're getting TV specials out of it and all that. Okay, let's do that. But he wanted it to still be an April Fool's and to make a joke of it, you know and I didn't want any part of that. And so he and I went round and round, and but he wanted me to do it, and so he thought he was going to get me to do it his way. So I did one shoot with him his way, and hated it. It made it into the magazine, but I went to see his boss, a guy named John Diana, that
Mhm.
was the terror of Peterson Publishing.
Which I knew him. I didn't know him when he was at Peterson. I got to know him when he was doing Buckaroo.
Oh yeah,
Later
yeah.
on, I got to know him. So
He'd mellowed a little bit by then, but if I always got on with him because he was a huge womanizer, and he always thought I was a way to find models and bring them to Hot Rod. But it was his way or the highway, you know, and he was, I don't know, maybe 5'4", and Pat Ganal's 6'2" or 6'3". Everybody called him Too Tall Ganal, and maybe even more than that,
He was
6'6".
more than
Yeah,
6'4", yeah.
and they couldn't stand each other, you know. And they would have these wonderful arguments. You could come into the building and those two would be screaming at each other. And there were these retaining walls around some of the desks. And you would see Pat from, like the chest up, and you just heard this voice yelling up. And Pat standing there talking like this, looking down.
so in
And
my
'cause-
mind, I seen scenes from Buddy the Elf when he,
oh yeah, yeah.
yeah.
It's kind of like that. That's a good way to put it. And it was kind of just entertaining to watch, the eye contact that you couldn't see. But I finally went in to see John, and I knew that was kind of going around Pat's back, but said, this is what, so you're going to do a swimsuit issue? Yeah. So this is what Pat wants to do, and I don't want anything to do with that. I'm going to do it. And John just kept saying, do it your way, Randy. Do what you want to do. I trust you. Just do what you want to do. Okay, I can do that. And so I said, but I got a problem in that, this was starting up in late September, and the film was all due by the first day after you come back from New Year's holiday, you know, because that's the last drop dead point to make the April issue, which again was always April Fool's. So I told him, this is what I'm going to do, or this is what I want to do, but how am I going to keep Pat off my back? Because he's going to want to see this along the way. And John said, I'll keep Pat at arm's length, and you figure out a way to just not answer his calls and go do what you want to do. So I did. And, Pat would call and, hey, can you bring in some film? How's this going? Or whatever. Baskerville's getting cars set up for you. I know you got a shot done. Where is it? Oh, I can't get up there today, or I can't get up this week. I'm in, wherever, telling him bullshit. And I just, kept avoiding him, waiting for that first week of January. And in the meantime, I'd done a cover, done all these other things. And now this cover, as you're seeing there, my lovely wife here. There's a bunch of scoots.
I feel a little awkward because I have had pictures of her pinned up on my shop wall. So, yeah.
So here, it's the weekend after the New Year's, and I had this horrific little episode with one of the other models from the magazine for New Year's Eve, and it didn't end well. It ended with all of us at the Queen Mary, and at a big New Year's party that was going on at the Queen Mary in Long Beach, and she really pissed me off. And so I took her down to the cab line in front of the Queen Mary and said, "Get in the cab." Well, where are we going? What doesn't matter. Get in the cab. And I handed the cab driver at that time, well, this is whatever, 87 or 86. I said, here's $40. Take her $40 on the meter, stop the car, tell her to get out. What? You hear it screaming as they drove away, I'm done with this, all this with models. I'm done dating models. I'm done. And so now it comes a week or so later, and well, I'm sorry, not a week, a few days later, and here it is, the Sunday after that Friday night or whatever, and I get this phone call that, hi, I'm a model, and
Pat
uh,
Ganal
Pat,
told me to call you. He said that because I just did the cover of Hot Rod magazine, and he said that you're doing a calendar and some inside pictures, and that you're looking for pretty girls. And I didn't want to say that. I thought that sounded very pretentious, but Pat said, yes, just tell him you're a pretty girl. And you're like, I go, okay, whatever. So he said, I have got all the pretty girls I need. Click. And he hung up on me. He hung up on me.
talking to her, and she says, yeah, Pat Ganal tells me you need some pretty girls. And I said, I got all the pretty girls I need.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I was over it. And she said, and I just did the cover for Hot Rod magazine. And now I thought, well, this is total BS because I've already shot the cover of Hot Rod magazine. And so I said, I got all the pretty girls I need. Hang up.
Yeah.
And
Nice.
done, So comes Monday or Tuesday, and I go deliver the film to Hot Rod, and then the next day, John Diana calls me, and he said, what the hell is this? And that's the way he starts the conversation. I live at the beach an hour from the office, and I said, what are you talking about? And he said, this cover. What's with this girl with these corny inflatable palm trees? And there's a mini truck. What are you thinking getting a mini truck on the cover of Hot Rod? What the hell are you talking about, John? And he goes, a Corvette, because Corvettes were even sort of questionable for Hot Rod,
Mm-hmm.
And I said, John, I shot a blonde. I did shoot a blonde, but she's with a yellow 32 Highboy. Baskerville got the car for me, and we shot it in this old garage. And he goes, no. In fact, this cover is a fold-out cover now, and we got advertisers buying the inside pages, and that's not. And I said, what the hell are you talking about? And he goes, get your ass up here. And I said, oh, come on, John, and get up here now. So I, haul butt up to the Peterson Publishing offices up on the Sunset Strip. And before I went to John's office, I ran into the art department with this guy, Craig Korn, who was art director at the time, a great, goofiest guy in the world. And then there's this pretty blonde bent over the big light table in there with her, stonewashed jeans at the time. And it's because it's the 80s. And her LA Gear tennis shoes and all that. And I thought, wow, and I looked over at Craig and I said, who's that? And he goes, she's on the cover. I said, there's no way she's, and he goes, and so I go over and talk to her, and it's like, what are you looking at? What are the pictures? And she goes, oh, it's my cover photos. And so let me see. And so I start looking on the light table. Oh, what the heck is this? And so I look over at Craig again, and they used to make these things called chromolins, which were like a real thick, heavy, vibrant color. Last chance to make any changes, and the color proof and alignment and all these things from the printer was the final sign off from whoever at the company to go ahead and start the presses. And he had this cromolin hanging on the wall in his office on his bulletin board. And I said, that's my cover. And he said, I know, it was. And I said, can I have that? And he gives it to me. And then I went to John's office and I said, so what's going on? And John shows me the cromolin of Stevie's cover. I said,
I
don't
just
know.
did what I was being told. I had no idea this drama. I was just called to do the cover of a magazine. I go, okay, yeah.
Didn't know what Hot Rod was or anything, and so she, I went in and told John, I said, no, this is the cover. No, it's not. He said he's already signed off the cromolin without getting my approval, and the cover's gone. And
So she's on that cover, but you didn't shoot that picture.
didn't shoot it.
Okay.
No, he's the guy who hung up on me. Remember? Yeah. That's how I will always remember.
Didn't know it was the same girl. You know? And so I start talking to John about it, and I said, oh, Pat must have got nervous because we were coming up on final deadline, on color deadline, and he went and got got a girl and shot a cover, you know, and
So you should have talked to Pat.
well, he was covering his butt, is what he was doing, and then, and whatever reasons, he knew the photographer. It was a friend of his wife's actually, and she was a photo teacher, and so they knew each other, but it escalated, and
So anyways, he walked me to the elevator.
oh, wait,
And he said, I'll do everything for you. Would you like to go out with me? I go, no, I don't know. And so he said, I will shoot your portfolio for you. And here we've been married, what, how many years?
oh, well, that
My book.
well,
You
we've
know, he
been
said,
married since 1990,
so
so 36, well, almost, yeah,
36
30.
years later, I'm still waiting for my modeling book to be done. Two
Well, maybe he
kids,
thinks if
couple
he
of
does
mortgages.
that, if he finally
Yeah.
completes the job,
Yeah.
you'll be gone. You're just hanging
Well,
out.
Yeah.
he got to be on millions of magazine covers and millions of Ford ads, and my kids as babies and toddlers and everything else
Babies.
were always in Ford brochures and Ford ads. But so they all got their share of pictures. But with Pat there, or with John there that day, I said, John, I'm not here to put nails in Pat's coffin, because I knew how much he didn't like him, and he goes, you just put the final nail in his coffin.
Pat was such a great guy.
And
He
it's
was
like,
such a great
oh,
guy.
no.
So was that the end of Pat Ganal at Hot Rod then?
Yeah, well, they told Pat Ganal a different reason. There was this whole thing with Caddyshack, it was called at the time, that was the reason he was getting fired. John would have fired him for not combing his hair properly at that point. They just didn't like each other
Did
at
you
all.
go to his memorial?
Yes,
Yeah.
we did. Yeah, we both did.
So
Yeah.
what did the shirt that Bill Ganal wore like under said? Did my dad ever piss you off, or was my dad an
no,
asshole to you?
Yeah, was my dad ever a prick to you? Yeah.
But
And Pat could do that, I mean.
Pat was always really sweet to me. Always really sweet.
But he had me do a lot for Hot Rod too, Pat did. And he had me writing for Hot Rod quite a bit. Len had me do some writing, but Pat had me do quite a bit.
If it hadn't been for that, you would have never met me.
If Pat hadn't have done that, wouldn't have met her. And so
we had these great kids.
Yeah, so I said, like she said, I went back in there to meet her and talk to her, and I get to know this girl,
So
Maybe
how often does she bring up that you hung up on her? Like weekly?
Well,
Yeah.
Well, any opportunity there.
I save it.
You call him on the cell phone, you're like out running errands or something. It's like, hey, don't hang up on me. I have a question.
Yeah. Watch this. Yeah. So, it comes in handy once in a while still to this day.
Does she pay you back every once in a while? Because you'd be like, hey, guess what? And then click, she'd be just hang up on me.
I got all the pretty girls I need. Got her and I got my daughter, So, and, your mom was a pretty girl too. But it's the magazine got published, it got out and got done, and it became the largest selling issue of Hot Rod at the time, And so
let's talk about the next highest issue of Hot Rod.
Well, I got to tell you one quick thing before I tell you this, because you mentioned it in the beginning, was good old with Linda Vaughn, and when I went to shoot with her, we flew down to Florida, and with, just to tell you that story, because it was just a fun one. And especially at the time at my age, it was like, oh my God, I'm with Linda Vaughn. And, my dad would kill me to be in my place right now. But we went down, we shot, I didn't know what I didn't know. And so we're staying at the Breakers Hotel, this beautiful place right on the beach. And, okay, let's meet early in the morning. And I told, I needed electricity because I brought these strobes and stuff to light Linda. And so Warren says, well, I got electricity on the semi. Well, okay, we'll just pull it over there on the lawn next to the building where we're going to put the car, and we'll plug into you. And so we pull his semi out there on the lawns at the Breakers, and got Linda posing with the car and strobes going off. Never asked the Breakers, never thought that it was going to be a problem. Never even, it just never occurred to me. Well, they call the cops, you know, and so the cops show up, and
As usual.
and so Linda, I've got pictures of all that too to this day, pours on Linda. And so the zipper on her jumpsuit comes down a little further. She starts playing with her collar and, oh, guys, and oh my God, you're Linda Vaughn. And so she's taking pictures with the cops and sitting on their motorcycles and, doing that whole thing. And they say, how long is this going to take? Oh, well, a couple hours. Okay, we'll be back to make sure you leave. And great, she made it all happen. And then, so that night I went to dinner with her, and she says, so what's your plans tomorrow? So I got the rental car, and we all need to get to Moroso Raceway in the morning because they're going to start testing and tuning with the car, and qualifying is going to start in a day or so, and warning everybody. And I got to get off to go shoot the car at the racetrack. And she said, "Oh, don't worry about that." And I said, "No, I gotta get there, and it's a couple hours drive away or whatever." And I'll get us there. Don't worry about it. And so because we start staying up late, having a couple of drinks and having a big dinner and stuff. And so I was like,
And that's the photo shoot that he was talking about right there.
yeah,
Yeah, she was great.
I gotta go. No, it'll be okay. She's just been a sweetheart. And so the next morning, she said, I'll get somebody to return your rental car for you. And she had called Dick Moroso and said, hey, is the plane available? And he says, "Oh yeah, go ahead." And so we go over to her, and I go there with all my strobes and my camera gear, go to this local small airport, and he's got this big twin prop, whatever it is. I don't know anything about airplanes, but this gorgeous, huge airplane. And you open the door, and it was total 70s disco playpen in that place. It was all brown, shag carpet that long, and a big playpen sofa in the back with these gold lamps hanging over, and no airplane seating. It's just a party palace back there, and throw my strobes in, and okay, let's go. And so we're talking and flying to the racetrack. When we get to the racetrack, they make a pass or two over the track, and you see cars lining up and guys, getting ready for, testing and tuning and everything for that weekend's race. And there's all these people in the stands, and they radio down, hey, we need to land. And so, like, what? Where are we going to land? It's Dick owns the plane. Dick owns the racetrack. We're going to land on the drag strip. Like, what? And in we go, and landed the plane on the drag strip, and the guy on the PA's yelling and telling everybody it's Linda Vaughn or whatever, announcing the whole thing to the crowd that was there. And we taxied down, made a U-turn, and come back, and they roll the door open and roll up these little stairs for Linda. And Linda's out, yeah, hi. The crowd goes wild, kind of a thing. And it's like, this is what it's like, I remember like the Beatles getting off the airplane in New York City. I'm walking down behind Linda going like, hi, everybody. It was, yeah, this is not a bad life, to be a 24-year-old kid chasing around with Hot Rod magazine, But anyway, later on, when we go on from doing the swimsuit issue.
And the budgets for photo shoots back then were like they had budgets like,
well, compared to today, yes, that's absolutely true. But they still didn't really have the budgets. Even with the swimsuit issue, I told them, this is how much money, because I'm gonna have to pay girls, and I'm gonna have to pay makeup artists and all that sort of thing, and maybe some locations, we might have to pay for it, which was unheard of to them at the time, paying for a location. But so I made a deal with John Diana. I said, you got enough to pay my expenses as a budget for the swimsuit issue. And so here's what I'll do. If you'll pay that, I'll use it to cover my costs. And then if you'll give me 3/4 page ads in Hot Rod, I'll create a calendar, the one that she was talking about. And I'll sell a calendar, a high zoo, fancy, nice paper calendar and Hot Rod for the upcoming year, And so once I got and John agreed to that. Then once I got the calendars printed and had a sample, I came up and showed it to him, and he goes, how many did you get made? And I said, 25,000. He said, we're going to buy them all.
Hmm.
Just like that. Like, what? And he said, yeah, they're all mine. And so he did. And he made a deal with me on how much, he'd pay for them. I thought, this is freaking awesome. This is going to be great. And then a day or so later, he calls back and he goes, well, we're still going to buy them, but I can't pay you what I told you I was going to pay you. I said, why not? And now this is the legal realities of magazines. He said, it turns out I can't offer, you can't offer something as a subscription incentive, which is what he was doing. Subscribe to Hot Rod Magazine and get this calendar for free. The calendar was worth more than the magazine subscription, and that's illegal. So he had to come back on the price, and eventually it all got done, and got the and took the load off of me. Had all these pallet loads of calendars delivered to Peterson and got it done. But then we end up doing that same every year for 5 or 6 years because it always sold until Kedzilla came along. That was a whole nother gigantic leap for mankind, and again they came. Harry Hibbler, who was publisher at the time, he came to me and he said, Jeff Smith was editor, had just become editor because Pat Canal had just gotten his walking papers, and said, this is what's been going on. And I'd been down to Boyd Coddington's shop 2 or 3 times, seeing the car getting built. Went down there with Baskerville once or twice, seeing the car getting built, and just hanging around at Boyd's shop. And now the car's getting done and we want you to shoot it. And we have a $3,000 budget, to shoot the Cadzilla. Well, I mean, it was going to cost me that much money to be in the studio for a week, because they had a huge list of things they wanted to accomplish. And okay, and I told them I want to build a set, I want to do this, and I want to do that. I mean, I don't know what I'm going to do, but but I thought this is a big freaking deal. It's ZZ Top, and they knew I'd worked with celebrities, so okay, we'll have you, want you to do it, don't want anybody fawning all over them or whatever. And so, and I'd shot the Eliminator coupe by that time a couple of times as well. And so, okay, it's all going to happen. We're going to get this done, and I have to start figuring out how to build a set for this, to shoot, and it's going to be an 8x10 camera. It's 8x10 transparencies, like black hood over your head and all that kind of stuff. Gigantic sets of strobes to try and get enough light to light for 8x10 cameras. And we took a week building a set. I went to, I think it was Sony Studios, or maybe whatever it was prior to Sony, whatever it was. And I used to get these painted backgrounds. They had painted backgrounds that were enormous. I mean, they had some of them that were 100 feet long from, Ben-Hur or whatever, these movies, and just racks and racks of them, and catalogs that you could look through to pick which one you wanted. And I just thought I want to do something grungy and kind of dirty looking and back alley looking. And I found this, thing that I wanted, and with this tunnel that is the background in the Cadzilla shot. And so, and it was 40 or 50 feet long. And so I told the guy, I want to rent this, as I'm looking through the catalogs, and he goes, what are you using it for? And I said, well, I'm going to shoot this fold-out poster for Hot Rod Magazine with ZZ Top. And when does that come out? And I told him, and he said, well, I think that's okay because the dates will match up okay because the movie hasn't been, or had just been released, or was just getting released. And I said, oh, really? What movie is it? And he said, it's this movie called Spaceballs, and
which they're coming out with a Spaceballs 2. Did you know that?
Oh yeah,
No.
I've seen stuff about that.
Yeah, like Rick Moranis came out of retirement, and then
oh
Josh
my God,
Platt or something
how
like
cool
that
is that?
is like
Unfortunately, no John Candy. Yeah. Oh man.
Mhm.
But so I don't know if you ever seen the silly movie, but there's a scene where the robot evil robot maid is going to vacuum the Earth's atmosphere away, and Rick Moran or John Candy. They fly in with this flying Winnebago and fly into the ear of the robot like it's the Star Destroyer to go in there and blow it up and stop this whole thing.
See,
Well,
I have seen Spaceballs from front to start, but it's hard to believe as I'm a movie person. I've never seen Star Wars.
Oh my God!
In one whole clip, and neither has she.
Oh my God!
Oh my gosh, you have
Yeah.
to, you have to get it.
I finally did that long ago with Godfather. To finally sat down and watched it. But they're flying into that tunnel. It's the ear canal for that robot. The robot made sucking the atmosphere off the Earth. But so we built a set. My photo assistant and I at the time, Jeff, and spent a week or almost a week. Well, it's probably maybe even a couple days more than a week building a set, and went to prop houses and just, well, this is cool. Get this. And oh, that's cool. I'll rent that. And then, took the chain link fence out of the alley behind the studio complex that we were working at, and got the bus bench off the curb out front, and snagged it, and just wherever we could grab something, we did. Went back to see Boyd and got the original Cadillac grill and bumper and steering wheel, a few odds and ends parts to hang on that chain link fence, and built this set. Oh, and a big 50-gallon drum with a propane tank to make it look like a fire for the guys, the bums in the alley to hang out and warm themselves.
Thank goodness you don't decorate our house like
You
that. You kind of do. You kind of do. He one time picked up a dolphin it was a styrofoam dolphin off a freeway. It just, oh my gosh, it was like life size. And you put it in it was this jumping dolphin, and he put it on the hedges of our yard. So you go in the backyard and they go, what is this dolphin coming out of?
See, that's good taste, in my opinion. We built a car for a guy that he lived in Northern California, and he lived in this like bay, and like he had a corner lot in his big pool. He hired one of the Disneyland sculptors to build this big, like 20-foot dolphin on the corner. So
yeah.
We were coming down a 2-lane. Well, there's 2 lanes in each direction road. I don't remember where we were coming from, Bass Lake or something, with our boat, and the kids in the back of the SUV and dragging along, and it's, I don't know, 2 in the morning or something. And everybody there,
we saw a dolphin.
She and the kids are asleep, and I slammed on the brakes in the middle of nowhere in the desert there to make a big U-turn with the boat. And it's like, she goes, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And I said, I saw a dolphin laying in the desert back there. Oh yeah,
We'll stop for anything on the road.
You're hallucinating.
Our story's slightly different. We were driving from Phoenix one time to Vegas for the weekend with her mom, or meet her grandma for her birthday, but we were leaving. Anyway, we're driving through the middle of the desert, right? Like Wickenburg, all that stuff. We're driving a rented minivan, and we see a purple shopping cart in the desert. So we stopped and got the shopping cart and strapped it to the roof. And we,
oh my gosh, you guys are the same.
Yeah, and with our belts.
Yeah, we strapped it with our belts, and it would roll back and forth. And we stopped at getting into Vegas. We stopped at the dam, and like the foreign tourists with their pictures, they were taking pictures of the dam and our minivan with
the shopping cart.
Crazy
Americans. I mean, I told her, I said,
it's probably illegal to take that shopping cart.
Probably.
Well, it was probably illegal
to have a little sign.
Probably a little illegal to paint it purple too, but who cares?
Yeah.
That was someone's home.
Yeah.
There wasn't stuff in it, so it wasn't like a homeless guy's stuff. Yeah. So it was just a random cart.
Literally in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
Like we're just driving and
funny.
Random.
Yeah. I understand his thinking.
Yeah. Well, so I pulled over in the middle of the night there and threw this big dolphin in the back of the boat and, took it on home. It must have come off of a carnival ride or something. I mean, that was getting dragged through the desert, or I don't know. But it was a bitchin' dolphin for a while he lasted, Yeah. Anyway, so we got the set built, got things done for stealing and borrowing and renting to build a set, and then we had a list of photos, this long that I needed to get accomplished, and a cover and all this other stuff, and hired, a model for that. And then, Billy Gibbons would check in with me every once in a while we were building the set. And he said at one point, do you know who Bill Ham is? And I said, no. He said, he's our manager. and he's the one that's made us, as big as they were. I mean, this is the '80s,
Mhm.
they ruled MTV, and he says, Bill Ham's going to come over and double check on this. He wants to see what's going on. And he said, he's big time and he knows he's big time, but just ignore him, and okay. And so Bill Ham comes over. I figured, I've worked with bigger people than this. It ain't going to intimidate me. And so Billy kind of stood off over his shoulder in the background, and he's just going, what stuff Bill would say, And he said, who built this set? I said, I did, and Jeff here helped me. Where'd you get that background? I told him. And where'd you get the bench out front? And he said, how much to buy all of this?
Mm.
And I said, he goes, what's it worth? And I said, I can't sell it to you because, some of it we stole, some of it we borrowed, some of it's rented. And how much is it going to cost? What is it going to take? And I said, I have no idea. I could look into that for you, and find out what they could find out. I said, what do you want this for? And he said, it's going to be the next stage for the next ZZ Top tour.
Oh, cool.
And I said,
Oh, wow.
really? Okay, well, I'll get numbers. And I did, and never heard back from him. But regardless, now it's all coming to time to do the shoot. And Billy, like I said, had been hanging around a little bit, and Dusty had come in a couple of times, and they weren't getting on too well as a band at the time. They had had some. They'd been working their asses off, and touring like crazy, and everybody wanted to break, and Billy told me, he said, Frank, the drummer, Frank Beard, is going to be a little tough. He said, because this whole thing with these cars, they belong to Billy. They're not ZZ Top cars. And you got to make sure of that. And Billy had offered them to be part owners in the beginning. Just make
Yeah,
this
because
as
there was
easy.
even a story when they were building the Cadzilla that Craig Naff put the ZZ Top logo in the firewall, right?
Yeah.
And there was some
Yep.
question on if they could legally do that because ZZ Top didn't own the car or
Didn't own
something
the
like that, right?
car. And
Yeah.
whether or not I could show that in photos, because it stayed in the firewall, but to avoid it, And yeah, it was a big deal because the Eliminator Coupe had made so much money. Billy had Buffalo, what's his name? Buffalo Motors. Oh, gosh,
Yeah,
terrible.
they built a second one out of fiberglass.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And California Street Rods built that one, and they'd made so much money off that, but it's Billy's car, but it's the ZZ Top car now, but it's Billy's car, and how do you, I don't know, whatever they did to divvy up the funds that car was creating. But Billy told me at the time, he said, we've already got an offer of over $1 million for the t-shirt rights on Cadzilla. And so,
Yeah, I know when we seen ZZ Top then with our car club, the concert shirt has Cadzilla on it.
yeah.
Oh, really?
And
Yeah.
so, in fact, that was one of the things Bill Ham said, here's 7 lines. And he drew this little thing on 7 lines that I could still do on a piece of paper, which was the outline of Cadzilla. And he said, anything you do that appears to this 7 lines, he said, we own it.
Huh.
Okay. We won't go into the whole thing of copyright on photo ownership and all that, but whatever you think, dude, that's fine, and but I want to buy the set. And then so he finally goes, and Billy says, yeah, ignore it. And but he said, Frank's going to be a little bit of a problem. And so the next day is the shoot. And so I hired 2 makeup artists. Both of them had worked for Playboy, and they're both pretty girls. And I thought this will be good just to, chill everybody and look good for Hot Rod. And they delivered these outfits with racks of clothing, like I expected, and boxes and boxes of different hats. And when the big roll up doors open on the studio, see this big white Lincoln Town car pull up, limo, and it's Frank, and the other 2 guys had just come with their car. It wasn't a big presentation. And he gets out, and he has 2 blondes climb out of the back of the limo with him, and he's got his arm around each, and walks in the door. And I said, hey, Frank, I'm pleased to meet you. I'm Randy, and this is here's the set. Here's what we're going to be doing. And he said, and Billy had told me, he said, all he wants to do is golf these days. And now Billy's standing back in the background again, doing the head shake. And I said, well, here's what we're going to do today. And Frank looks at his watch and he goes, you got an hour. And I said, well, we got quite a lot to accomplish today. And there's a number of outfits and some hats and, food and drink back there for you in the makeup room. And he goes, you got 59 minutes.
Mhm.
Hurry,
And,
hurry.
so looked over to Billy, and Billy's like, got to do it,
Yep.
Okay. So we did, get them out there and shoot, a bunch of sheets. I don't know what we shot, 6 or 8 or 10 sheets of 8x10 film and a couple of Polaroid. Shooting 8x10 Polaroids back then, it was $25 a sheet for the Polaroid, and I'd write notes on the back of what's working here and what's not, what I need to change before I shoot the next sheet of film. Still have all those old Polaroids even, and got it done. Got the shots done with the band. What Billy came back out and he said, we're going to need you to just choose an outfit and get this done. And I said, put on the black suits and the black ties, and they had some like white cowboy hats that they were like, I don't like those. And it's going to be a little contrasty with those black suits. Use the black Quaker hats. I love the Quaker hats. So he said, okay. And he came back out and click, 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 done, see you guys. And Dusty and Frank took off. Billy hung around. We got a cover shot and did a few other odds and ends with the model that I'd hired. And we shot for another day or two after that with some of the details and those things that needed to get done. We all knew it was cool because it was Dare to be Different. Jeff Smith had come up with that tagline, and it would be fun. But there's a couple other cars on the cover just to cover his butt and make sure this is all going to work. He got in huge trouble over the cover because he used a photo. Actually, I didn't like it, but the rear 3/4 photo. This was a little quickie grab shot I did with 35 millimeter. And you just did not put the back end of cars on the cover of Hot Rod magazine. That was a deadly no-no to the circulation department. They had all these rules. You don't put orange cars on the cover. You don't put black cars on the cover. You don't put their back end. You don't put
I
cars.
never heard that about orange cars.
Yeah, it was orange cars too, and you don't put cars that have a number on them.
Mm.
And stuff like that. But so he eventually won that battle, and the cover went out. It sold beyond anybody's wildest expectations, and ZZ Top was huge. They did a thing with promoting Hot Rod on MTV, on MTV News. They're talking about them being in Hot Rod magazine, and
The
so
Strange Motion Way podcast.
it's the only
Yeah,
one
Brought
that
to you
people
by
bought it because
Royal
one,
Purple,
they're Hot Rod
premium
magazine
synthetic
guys,
motor
or
oils
Yeah.
and
they might have a
high-performance
subscription, but
chemicals
they
have
might
been
have bought a
designed
different,
to
an
improve
extra one like I
performance,
did, because you want to leave
provide
one magazine
long-term
together, and
protection,
then one you
and
pop
give
the
you the
poster out of
confidence
it.
to push
Yeah.
your vehicle to
And
the
then
limit.
ZZ
People that
Top
were rock and
fans.
roll
Royal
fans, yeah,
Purple,
they
Yeah.
would buy
premium
it
synthetic
probably
motor
more
oils.
so than. Is it true
Yeah.
that they had to do a reprint mid through that month on that magazine?
Yeah, that's what I've always been told too, that, Midway, that they'd never done that before. It's like you always have projections, and this is going to be the print run with expectations of this many sales in the print run, because there's always going to be leftover magazines, but that expectation ran out. So pump them out there, get another run out there, get another batch of. They'd
So
never
somebody
done
told
that.
me, maybe it was one time me and you were on the phone, that some guy ended up with a handful or a box of the posters that were never folded or put in the magazine.
That's me.
Okay.
Yeah.
You need my address so you can ship me one of those?
Where
Yeah,
are
I have those.
Did
And I have the final proof from the press as well. It's not a chromalin because I didn't want to pay for one that was that big, but the final printer's proof and sign off sheet on it. I have that. But and I have the final chromalin from my cover that never got used either. The cover that never was
We've
for
heard enough
for
about
for
that.
the swimsuit issue. But yeah, it sold like gangbusters. And so between the swimsuit issue that Jeff Smith inherited, had been done under Pat's tutelage, but Jeff was the editor when the numbers started coming in, and now we just did ZZ Top, and it was spectacular. He was golden, he was the golden boy, and so things were going wonderfully.
Well, that's it for me then.
Okay.
Yes. So, yay. Thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you. And thanks for being on my wall back then.
Hey,
Yeah,
anytime. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a wallflower. Yeah.
yeah.
You can tell she's shy. That's her on with the Ferrari right back there too. So yeah, anyway, so then, the things move along. I mean, Hot Rod's doing well, everything's going great,
There's
but then
another photo shoot you did with the Rad Rides car that had a really cool backdrop stuff too. That one was still.
Yeah.
The Peach 50 Buick just popped up.
Yeah.
so.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's when Lana Manuelson went over and took over with CarCraft and all the other lesser magazines to start bringing the newsstand numbers up on them. So he had me working my tail off. Let's get these magazines looking better and see if we can bring some numbers up.
So that was the era when we talked about the Cadzilla car. Did you shoot the one too that the Rad Rides, or did somebody else shoot that? Rad Rides had the 60 Impala that was a pull-out poster.
No, that was one of the guys on the photo department staff, and
Okay.
that's what
And
I hated.
there was like a
those.
couple years there they did posters for off and
Yeah.
on, and I mean I still have them. Everybody pulled them out of there, popped them up on the wall. Whether
Right.
like it's so cool. But,
Yeah, they in fact, like with the they were doing real simple stuff. They had put up a big background in the parking lot next to the old photo studio there at
Okay.
Peterson, and pull the car out there and click, click, click.
And
So
then
when I
kind of jumping out of order, do you think maybe that's why, because those posters and what you were part of back then, when Diana did Super Rod, he did posters every other month, or we were lucky.
Yeah.
We had a couple of our cars in the pull-out poster through the
Yeah.
years.
He
Super
knew it
Rod.
sold magazines, It
Yeah.
was very expensive to do for the magazine, but if you could justify it, it sold
Mhm.
magazines, And Humongous, I mean, it was that was going to be CarCraft's Cadzilla, because Cadzilla had just done so well, and now
Mhm.
Len had shifted over to that division of the company. So we were going to do the same thing with Humongous. And so we'd made arrangements with Troy to bring it. I had to be in Detroit to shoot some other stuff for whatever it was. So can you get the car to Detroit? Yeah, we can do that. And I dragged a 30-foot light box to assemble and build, and all my strobes and all that stuff all to Detroit with me, and then searched around for just crap building. I just wanted something horrible, old beat up warehouse, broken
Mhm.
windows, and just something. It should be cool, and do something similar to what we did with Cadzilla. So with
And you were kind of the
Humongous,
first one to do that. Now we have a good friend. He does a lot now, modern era. John Jackson has shot notoriously in old buildings. Like he did a really cool photo shoot for a few of our cars when we still lived in Illinois. And he had the gift of gab with people that somehow, like, oh, you can't. Kewanee, Illinois used to be one of the biggest boiler factories, and it was half run down, half fallen down. And the people would get shot at for stepping on the property. And he's like, pull me up to the office. I go, dude, you don't want to go here. He was in there 15 minutes. He goes, yeah, 2 days we got the full run of the place. I don't know what he did, but yeah.
I had a few places out here that were like that, industrial sites, this Coke yard and stuff, and also the Edison plant near here. I've shot there a number of times, and about 70 or 80% of that plant is from the 40s and 50s, and it is completely unused. And it looks like this is where they built Frankenstein. When you go in there, there's all these big dials and levers, and it's so cool looking. And they let me go in there because the guy had a 55 Chevy Nomad. Said, "You shoot my car?" "Oh yeah, I'll shoot your car if you let me come back around here once in a while."
No.
And he did. In fact, even with Ford, when the new Mustang was coming there in '04 with the retro Mustang, Jay Mays with head of design, he said, "I saw those things like you did with Hot Rod and this and that, and I want to do something like that with the Mustang." you know, okay. I said, "Do you know anybody over at the Rouge plant, which was the original Ford plant?" I don't know if you ever saw that, but all the original old steel pipes and steel everything, and everything from the 20s and 30s that was still there that was not being used. It was a rust hellhole, and these trains that still went through there, because they were at that time they were actually building Mustangs still in the back of the plant over there, but the rest of the facility was so ancient and so outdated, it was just, derelict. And I said, "Yeah, I'll go over to the Rouge plant." He said, they'll never, same deal. There's armed guards, there's this, they'll never let you in there. And so I went over and talked to the guy in the booth and, the guard shack and, got to talk to him about this, that, and the, oh, yeah, I read Hot Rod Magazine. And yeah, he's like, yeah, you're the same Randy? Yeah. Just bullshitting with him. I said, what do you like to drink? Oh, this is my favorite brandy, I said, so we'll be back tonight with the new Mustang that nobody's supposed to see. He said, I'll be here waiting for you. So I bought him the biggest bottle of that brandy I could find, and then we were. So when I delivered all those photos to Ford, Jay Mays and the design crew came in. How in the hell did you get in there with this? Find out what their favorite booze is. You'll get in anywhere.
So you told a story before about it was for Ford, and about the big rollout thing, and then the one guy like butted in and wouldn't let you.
Yeah,
Am I getting part of that story right?
Yeah, that was with Ford GT program and the 100-year anniversary of Ford Motor Company. So this was like 04, 05. And they'd had me shooting the Ford GT from the beginning. I mean, I shot it when it was still, early concept forms and all that kind of stuff. In fact, again, Jay Mays was head of design for Ford at the time, and I got to know him, and he was a really interesting guy, incredibly talented. He's the one that brought all the retro. I mean, he did the VW Bug and the Audi TT, and brought the Mustang back, and wanted to bring back the Ford GT and the 49 Smooth, which has come through in some photos here.
I wish they would have built that car. And wasn't
you mean
offset,
everybody else?
Foose was helped a little bit on the design of that.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
Well, but Jay was not the biggest car guy in the world. A lot of the guys in design and that sort of thing are not car guys. They'll ask you what engine is in that car, and it's kind of crazy once you kind of get inside that crew. But and Jay was, he knew from the car magazines, and he loved having that insight. Well, what do you think Road and Track or Car and Driver is going to say? What do you think? What will Motor Trend do? Can you get me on the cover of Motor Trend? Can we get on the cover of Road and Track? He would ask me those things. And so internally at Ford, there was this, I would hear the word petunia every once in a while. And that we were working on the 49 Smooth project and had been shooting with it. Again, my wife is the model in the background there, my son and the designer, one of the Hutting brothers, the son's there. And I get more checks that way, family checks, But Jay came in one day when I was back there shooting something else, and he said, "Have they told you what petunia is?" And I said, "No, I hear the word getting bantered about." He said, "We're going to make a Ford GT40 again." I said, "What? I mean, what?" Since I was a kid in school, I mean, I did a report about the Ford winning Le Mans in the fourth grade, for a fourth grade book thing. And oh my God, Jay, you got to be kidding. No, we're going to do a concept and see if we can get it approved. So I want you to do all this photography with it. And which I did. And but when it came time when they got the first three real cars, 001, 002, and 003, red, white, and blue one. And the white one belonged to Bill Ford, William Ford, the Ford, And we want to shoot them together in the studio. I was shooting individual shooting, and everything was always horrific deadlines, and then back there at world headquarters inside this photo studio in the building there in Dearborn. And they're going to unravel this, I don't remember the exact measurements, like 125 feet by 80 foot or something, banner that covers the front of Ford World Headquarters of the three GTs together, red, white, and blue. And here it is, folks. And it's going to drive up on this stage in front of Bill Ford to announce the 100-year anniversary. Here's the new cars. There's banners everywhere, fireworks, the whole 9 yards. And so we were thrashing. And it was very early on with Photoshop and digital photography. And was shooting as much film as we were digital. Just unsure of it, But there was a couple of guys from the advertising agency, from J. Walter Thompson.
You're saying at that time you were unsure, you didn't trust the digital side of it.
Yeah, a lot of, even the magazines were unsure of it. It didn't reproduce as well sometimes. But we had to go with digital because we were on such tight deadlines. The amount of photography that had to get done before that 100-year anniversary, and that big banner that had to drop of the three cars together in the studio. I'm sure you've been in photo studios before, but with the cove and they're all painted white, you just walk in there and it's ruined, and you got cars you're moving around and tire tracks everywhere and setting up lights and when you're at Ford, you don't just walk over and grab a paint roller and paint your footprints out. You have to have the union representative come down and approve that, write a written estimate of what that's going to cost and who to bill, and it just delays everything, and it's just the way the life works there. So okay, that's just the way it is. And so we were dealing with that and slowing us down and falling further behind on the number of photos we need to get done. And this 3-car main shot, we got to a point where it's probably 2 or 3 in the morning, at that point, and still we need to paint out some. And these 2 guys that kept hanging around from the ad agency are 24, 25 years old at the time, and think I'm an old guy at the time, probably at 40 something, and saying, "Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. We'll just fix it in Photoshop. We'll fix it in Photoshop." They kept saying that about everything, and I kept saying, "We'll just fix it and shoot it right. We'll do it right. We'll fix it in Photoshop." And now here it is, 2 days or 3 days of these 20-hour days. And I said, "Okay, fine, screw it. We'll do what you want. Boom, 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 we'll shoot it." And there were tire tracks on the floor. And there's cables running from lights that we hadn't hidden yet, that they're not in the shot, but they're reflecting in cars. Cars are gigantic mirrors, And so it comes time for this little unveiling where they're going into the meeting room and at Ford World headquarters, like what you think of when it's all mahogany and wood and big high ceilings and this gigantic mahogany table with chairs the length of the tables and Bill Ford sitting at the end of the table. And one of those moments where I think, what the hell am I doing here? I mean, it just goes through your head like, how did this happen? I got
I'm
kicked
just
out
some
of
surfer
school.
kid with a camera.
I got kicked out of school. I got this kind of trouble. What am I doing here? But so anyway, they had made a test strip of this gigantic thing that's going to drag down the front of the World Headquarters building. And it was probably 10 feet long and maybe 5, 6 feet wide. And they had a ladder there, climbed up and held this sample strip of it. And going, and this is what we're going to do, and this is going to be, and now you get to see this blown up real big, and yada, yada, yada. And then the guy from the advertising agency turns to me in front of Bill Ford, in front of Jay Mays and all these Ford execs, and goes, "See, I told you were wasting our time thinking everything had to be perfect. Told you we'd just do it in After Effects, right in front of everybody, And so I can't let that just go by, So I stood up, I said, "Oh, wait, don't climb up." And I said, "Mr. Ford, now, he says he fixed the tire tracks," and he did on the floor here. "But I want you to understand that the cars are mirrors. And we all know that. And so where are those tire tracks oh, wait, they're running across the driver's door up towards the rear fender. Right across your car." I said, "Mr. Ford, when this is hanging 125 feet by 80 feet, it's going to look like somebody drove a Caterpillar across this car." And I said, "And see here, we're in the polished part of the aluminum of the wheel, that orange thing there, and this line in the wheel, that's 2 sandbags and a lighting cable. They're going to look this big on the front of the building. There's not going to be any guessing what that is." And Bill Ford looked over at those guys and he goes, "You got 24 hours to get this right, and we're done here." And so, well, screw you too. And so as we walked out, those 2 guys and their bosses from J. Walter Thompson walked over, "Thanks a lot for fucking throwing us under the bus." And I said, "I didn't throw you under I'm here. You guys threw me under the bus. I'm not going to let
you
that
started
go.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to finish it." And we did. But, so it got finished. They had to thrash, my work was done. and got to carry on to the next project, which was the GR1, the Shelby Daytona. No, in fact, first before that it was Daisy. Now there's the Daisy word floating around, and that was the Cobra, coming along. And so doing that, and then the GR1, which was like the Daytona Coupe, they had a
So
string
what
of
did
them.
you shoot? What was your longest stretch that you shot? Did you shoot longer for Ford or Hot Rod or Kartcraft, or what was
Well,
was it just
probably hot rod, because I'd still do hot rod and stuff all along in there. The car company stuff was a little bit seasonal, especially the advertising. All the new cars are coming in September or
Mhm.
whatever. And so the photography is getting done, 4 or 5 months in advance, and, shooting with cars that nobody can see.
Yeah.
And I mean,
So
that's
speaking
another.
of Hot Rod, what's your craziest that you can say story about Mr. Peterson? I mean,
Hmm.
because it's not that type of industry anymore. He had a jet, and
Oh, yeah.
like,
He was big
yeah,
time.
like, yeah.
He is big time. And, gosh, we had a few
Was
instances.
that you that
Again,
told the story? I hate to just bring up stories that I've heard
no,
from you
no.
already, but wasn't that you on another thing, an interview or something, that he was at like a plane show and walked into the plane and
Oh,
said,
yeah.
"I want," and like
Yeah.
he didn't, like he dressed
He always dressed, I mean, to me, kind of like a used car salesman. He'd
like
wear,
Rodney Dangerfield in
yeah, yeah,
Caddyshack, or not
that's a
quite
good
that bad?
example. I mean, but he dressed in a very expensive way, I'm sure, but it was kind of plaid sports coats with striped ties and that sort of thing. And
Mm-hmm.
she, Stevie's walking by again. She had a couple of times. One time we were at SEMA, and Stevie and I had just gotten married, and Mrs. Peterson was like, oh, everybody that worked there with Mrs. Peterson was like, wow, that's Mrs. Peterson. Nobody goes and approaches Mrs. Peterson, and like most of the editors had never spoken to Mr. Peterson,
Mm-hmm.
and he didn't know who some of them were. And but he'd hire me to do shoots of him or her, and um, he had he had started Peterson Aviation, and he had Gulfstreams, and the story you're talking about was he had at that time had 6 Gulfstreams, which were like about 48 to $50 million, gutted, no nothing in them. They would have 2 plastic seats in them. They were built, I think, in Atlanta, and they'd fly them to Long Beach. And now you start talking about, what do you want to do to fix them up? What kind of
Wow.
interior? What kind of
Yeah.
avionics? And you start spending your
Like building a hot
millions.
rod, but on a whole different money
Yeah,
level.
with millions of dollars of scale. And so they were all very Mr. Peterson, dark wood, like the Ford, office room there, dark wood, lots of button tucked leather, big high back chairs. You knew you were in money, man money, and his planes were that way. He'd hired me to shoot the planes for some of his brochures, but he had gotten this 7th plane and asked me to come out and shoot it. It's blonde wood, light colored carpet, and beige, real light colored, real cheerful looking inside, And it was like, oh, Mrs. Peterson liked this one, so we bought it. And so what the guy that's there from Gulfstream walks over to me after Mr. and Mrs. Peterson walk out of the plane while they're working on it, and he said, "Do you know that guy?" And I said, "Yeah, I mean, I don't know him, but I know who he is, and I've done a lot of work for him." And he goes, "Yeah, he said, we were at the air show in Las Vegas, which is like their SEMA,
Mm-hmm.
and we had this plane on display there, and in the Gulfstream, whatever, at the airport." And he said he walks in here, he's got like a used car salesman's jacket on, and a tie that doesn't match, and this big beautiful redhead with him, and walking around. And he goes, and you get lots of looky-loos like you do at any car show, walking around going, ooh, ooh. And he said, I didn't think much of him. And he said, how much is this plane? And he said, well, this one's about $50 million. Thinking, he's just another yokel coming in here going, ooh, wow, $50 million. And he goes, oh, okay. And he goes like this, pulled his checkbook out, and he goes, to make the Gulfstream Aviation 50 million. He gave me the check, and he said, I expect that to be at Van Nuys Airport in 3 days. And he said, yeah, well, sure, right. And no, no. I'm serious, deliver it to Van Nuys to Peterson Avionics. It's like, no. Yeah. And you got 72 hours for it to be, well, the show is still going on for the next, I don't care. Plane gets delivered. And they left. And he goes, and is that guy for real? I said, oh yeah, that's for,
Good check's good. Yeah.
he's for good. And the plane was there in 72 hours, And in fact, when I was there talking to Mr. Peterson about it, one of the stories he told me was like his planes, Gulfstreams have these 6 big oval shaped windows down the side, except on the one side of the plane, you can get a 7th window put in. But if you put the 7th window in, you don't get a galley right there or a closet for clothes or anything, but you get the 7th window. So as soon as you come into the plane, you can see out. But it's $1 million because you're cutting into the airframe and
Oh
altering it.
wow.
So
$1 million upgrade.
it's $1
for a
million
window.
upgrade. And all of Mr. Peterson's planes had the 7th window.
I'm sure
And
that's like a little bragging right, like, oh,
exactly
you
right.
pull into someplace in a Ferrari or
Yeah.
your private plane lands and it's got the extra window, so
Yeah.
that's not just a normal millionaire.
That's exactly right. Well, because I asked him, I said, why would you spend $1 million? He said, Randy, he goes, when you're in high school and everybody's got a cool car and you get some mag wheels, and suddenly your car is a little cooler than everybody else's. And he said, and then, you get a little older, you get some money, you buy a Porsche or like you said, a Ferrari. And he goes, but you go to the Ferrari event and everybody's got a Ferrari. So what can you do to your Ferrari? He said, it's the same exact
What do we
thing.
call that?
What?
Small penis syndrome.
Oh yeah, we call it small penis syndrome.
And he said, you go to the air shows, and he said, and everybody's, they're pulling in with their Gulfstreams, and they all go, ooh, he's got the 7th window. And he said, that's the only reason I do it.
For $1 million.
Yeah,
Holy
for $1 million.
So what do you think now? Like, that was the heyday of, I don't think there's any magazine publisher people buying $50 million jets. So what do you think? It's not what it used to be. Like, you used to get a car. All I wanted as a builder was to get a car in a magazine. And when you get a car in a magazine, the phone just started ringing. I still love getting cars in the magazine. Still my favorite thing to build a car for, but it doesn't make the phone ring as much as it used to because I don't, the social media posts and all of that stuff. What do you think of how the industry is now?
Oh, to be honest with you, it breaks my heart.
Yeah.
It breaks my heart. For in the late, well, from 20.
Because like, look, we have some of these like for the professional mounted photo shoots, so Street Rodder,
Yeah.
Rod
Yeah.
Custom, and now Modern Rodding. And I
Right.
don't take pictures of the coverage on the internet and frame it.
Oh, I know. I mean, it does.
Yeah.
Like I say, I feel exactly the same way. And I know a lot of builders, they all film the same way. But, you wouldn't believe the hot rod offices today, the hot rod Motor Trend office building is next door to a laundromat,
Yeah.
and if Mr. Peterson saw that, he'd roll in his grave,
Yeah.
But
Which I think John McGann is doing an incredible job with the magazine. It's quarterly. Everyone's like, I think he's doing because you talk to him and it's like, man, we just don't have budgets for nothing. Like, I had a car I wanted to get in the hot rod. He goes, I don't have a budget for it. And I go, you don't need a budget. I'll pay for the photographer.
Well, then you should call me because
Yeah.
I would love, and I talk to him and Mike Galimi every once in a while, and I'll say, God, I'd love to still be in hot rod, and we just don't have any money, and it's just the way it is. It's heartbreaking. I was hoping when Hearst came in.
She works for the company that runs Hot Rod Power Tours, so she's on meetings and so not with John, but it's Hearst Publications owns them, but
right.
Yeah, I think they're doing a great job. It's a great magazine still. It's not like it was, but nothing's like it was.
Right.
But for what, there's still nice paper, nice bound, great articles, great photography. He's doing a really good job with it. He really is. I know what his limitations are.
Yeah, they have they're scraping by. It's rough on them, and I would love to be doing stuff with them. I mean, I would love to hear more builders say, "I'll pay the photographer," then I
Yeah,
get out
yeah.
there and do it, But it's a tough thing. When I was at Source Interlink Media, when in 2008 or 2009, and 5 or 6 years there, when Doug Evans brought me in, when Source Interlink bought the magazines, and he said, "I want you to be director of photography." There was, I think, 32 car magazines at the time, and I want you to oversee these things. And I built 2 studios for them, and the second one there in El Segundo. The first one was at Gardena. I don't know if you were ever there. Did you ever come to the El Segundo offices and studio?
No, no.
I mean, I had 15,000 square foot photo studio and everything I could ask for. I need $3,000 just to get the building right, and then we'll start talking about, the equipment. And here's 300 grand, get it built. So it was my dream studio, but it was things were dying, and it was the most you like I say, at Peterson there were empire builders, and at Ford you realize, oh yeah, there can be very political. It's just the nature of large corporations. And but boy, that place, it was backbiting, backstabbing. Everybody was waiting to get fired. And if, a lot of guys were if I can get you fired before I get fired, then I last a little longer mode. And it
Yeah.
just wasn't, people would do photo shoots and they'd come in and go, boy, this is hot rod. And you sure can feel the vibe at this place. It just wasn't a happy place. And, because it was all coming apart,
Yeah.
and they were trying their damnedest to keep it together, but then we had all
So
got
do you
let
think a
go.
lot of people blame it is it because when it was starting to come apart like that, not really, not as what it was in the heyday, is because everything's online now, right? Do you think that's probably what hurt? I mean,
Well,
that's why kids don't buy magazines as much anymore because they can just get on this and look at everything.
I think there's a
You
lot of
know,
truth in that, but I think
yeah,
that a lot of things happened to, you can sit there and say, oh gosh, I got cancer and I'm dying while you're smoking a cigarette,
yeah.
I mean,
Mhm.
the stupidity of that. And they were doing things. What began to happen once the company kept getting bought and sold, there weren't car people there anymore. There
Right,
were
yeah.
just money people, and
Mhm.
I mean,
Bean counters.
yeah,
Yeah.
when I was a director of
Yep.
photography at Source Interlink, you go into meetings and they would just get pissed off and tell you, I don't know a 57 Chevy from a Camry, and I don't care. We're selling commodities here. I've gotten in a fight in one meeting, said, you mean like refrigerators and washers and dryers? Yeah, there's no difference. I said, there's a big difference, and that's why you're not understanding what's going on here.
Mhm.
I said, does anybody go try to fix up their refrigerator? I mean, that's called Consumer Reports, you know? Do we need
Actually, yes, I've got some old refrigerators that I fixed up and
well,
painted up.
but you
Yeah.
know what I
So yeah.
mean, as far as
Yeah.
Yeah.
you don't go into Home Depot saying, how can I customize this?
Right.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
they just didn't understand it. I was in one meeting with the guys from Surfer and Surfer Magazine, Surfing, because they knew my background, and they were fighting with the guys that were shoving ads down their throats that didn't take place for Zanzibelt slacks with the expandomatic waistband and Florsheim wingtip shoes. So they said, I was older than the guys that were running the surfing magazines. Can you come in here and explain to these guys? Surfers don't wear wingtips. Surfers
Mhm.
don't wear
Mhm.
Zanzibelt slacks with a expandomatic way. I mean, they just didn't get it, you know, and you just that's a
Yeah,
hard fight to fight.
I hope some people will someday that those titles that are on hold or shuttered. We had Tom Taylor on the podcast a couple of years ago now, and he tells a good story about trying to bring Rod and Custom back.
Right. And which
And
Pat all did, you know,
well,
at
like
one time.
since they closed it in 2019, that
Yeah.
it's a pretty good listen. That him and he's got investors ready to buy Rod and Custom, and they keep an eye on the copyright, trademark, or whatever it is. And Motor Trend at the time, this was before Hearst bought them, let it lapse,
Ooh.
and he applied for it. It was 2 months over, so the copyright people, whatever it is, said no. Since they've owned it for so long, we're going to give them 6 more months, and then they renewed it. So he had filed the paperwork to get the rod and custom
Wow.
made. He pays attention to that. So I just hope
Wow.
sometime that the Hearst maybe can say,
I've
okay,
never heard that.
we'll sell off this title, and they can bring in some money. But I don't know why they wouldn't want to do that. But especially
Yeah.
if it is a commodity to them, they're not like, oh no, I remember Rod and Custom used to be with Hot Rod. I don't think there's anybody there that has that feeling for it. So I don't. It's just
Well, I mean, there's at least Hearst, my initial hope hearing that it was Hearst purchasing them was that they're a magazine publishing company.
Mm-hmm.
I think if Hearst didn't buy them, we wouldn't even have Hot Rod anymore.
I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah,
They would have been gone. But also, for instance, everybody, you can still see on the news now the things that Warner Brothers going through and who's trying to buy Warner Brothers, and Warner Brothers had bought Discovery, and they're all losing hundreds of millions of dollars with streaming and all this and that. And they had been the ones that bought the magazines. Why they even, and they bought that in hopes that the YouTube channels, I'm sure, would bring in the money that there's no way it was going to bring. And thinking that the magazine is completely unnecessary. They saw no, and the value. I mean, when you start to deal with companies that are talking about that kind of numbers as far as dollars, saying we got $1 million advertising account with so and so. What's $1 million? We don't need to bother with that. What else you got? And those sort of things start to happen. And I think, to be honest with you too, it didn't do Hot Rod any service to go down that whole rat rod road for so many years, because it just completely undid what Hot Rod did, or was about. And not that everything has to be high end. I don't believe that either. But I believe in eye candy, and I learned that from Playboy. Nobody's thinking that they're going to marry the girl in the centerfold, but boy, as sure as hell could go by, the little,
I don't know. Some photographer guys probably thought they could, and they did. So
yeah, there are weird things that happen in this world, but you can always go by. I mean, this sounds so sexist. I know. I'm sorry, but you can go buy a bustier, or you can go buy those, trashy lingerie or whatever. The same exact truth is there for hot rods. Nobody's saying I'm going to go build a car just like Boyd Coddington was building at the time, but I love the way he does this, and I can do that on my car. Or I love the way they did that, or the way that Chip came up with this. I could do that, or Tom Taylor. I could steal that little idea, or make a version of that, and that eye candy completely disappeared. And I would bring that up in meetings at Source Center, like, where's the eye candy? Where's the fun? And I did one presentation where I went and I got years and years, I mean, all the way back from the 50s and the 60s and up to the current dates at that time, at 2012 or 2013, whatever it was, and said, look at these covers. Where did the fun go? It's all dark. It's chain link fence and barbed wires and some pretty rowdy looking folks, and the rowdier the better. But where's the fun? Hot Rod was fun, and need to bring the fun back, but it was like, screaming in the wind. It's not going to do you any good. It's a tough time, and
kind of like the direction that SEMA's went to. Like I remember when we started taking cars over 25 years ago now, that you used to have to send in pictures no matter where your car was to get approved, because they didn't want patina rat rod cars. And now it's just like, if you've got the money and they can squeeze a spot in, they'll take your car at the SEMA show.
I know. Yeah.
And it's like rat rods and stuff. And I'm okay with traditional cars being there, but it's all changed. It definitely has.
And it's not industry oriented, or not industry exclusive anymore.
Right.
So you kind of, it's I think a competition to see if the SEMA can get as big as CES, because CES is supposed to be the largest convention in the world, and whatever reasons they see to compete with that, I don't know, but I think that's where they target, what can we do to get bodies in here? But
like SEMA's so big now that some people are like, oh, the crowd seems down a little bit. And I was like, man, it's still 8 times bigger than it was in 2000, 99 or whatever it was when we went the first time. And I don't even try to get through half of the SEMA show. I make my list. I go to the hot rod area, hot rod alley. I go to the performance stuff.
Yeah.
She's out running racing. She hardly ever gets in the building because if you're just there as a tourist fan, you just have to power walk. Even it's that
Yeah.
big that you can't barely make it through it in the 4 days that it's open. It's just I mean, that one building is almost 1 million square feet they built a few years ago.
Yeah, you just, you know, when you start, I haven't been for 4 or 5 years now because I just got to that point where I thought, just, what am I gaining here? What is, I don't know. And it's expensive, obvious to go, but when you start seeing the OEMs pull out, when Ford and GM and everybody, you start going, what's going on? You know, when there's no
We used to do
longer a
dollar
return.
cars where they give us for what 12 different years. We got a brand new car, new release that they'd give the hot rods to build. And we kind of took it for granted back in the day. And now she needs a new car, and my truck that they last gave me, it's like, man, what I would do for that dollar car program again, to have a bitchin' new car, that we get parts and products to build up. Man, it's not like it used to be.
It's, and during the time then when Source Interlink sold, I mean, I don't know if you know who Source Interlink was, but they were like the second largest distribution company in the United States at the time. And they distributed magazines and distributed, like when one of the first meetings I had with some of those guys said, yeah, we're the second largest distributor of magazines, newspapers, VHS tapes, DVDs, and whatever else in the United States. And you go, who buys magazines, newspapers, and DVDs and VHS tapes anymore?
Yeah.
Oh, and they said, well, that's why we're buying this, to keep the Source Interlink distribution alive. We need something to distribute, And so they thought, but they didn't have, a person there, literally that knew a damn thing about a car,
So what do you think now that everything's you were film and all that, what you were talking about with the hood? What do you think about the digital revolution of everything? Do you trust it now?
It's a hard answer to give without sounding like an old man, like back in my day, but quite literally, everybody's a photographer now, and because everybody has a phone.
I'll throw him under the bus because he hasn't done our podcast yet. Rob Fortier. He worked for Rod and Custom and stuff. I've known him for a long time. He's a good dude. And he was covering an event at Good Guys. And Rob likes to be under the radar. Like, he won't wear branded stuff. He wear a hat every once in a while. He doesn't like to be like, hey, I'm the magazine guy, because he's kind of chill. He doesn't want people to follow him along. Hey, my car, come look at my car. Come look at my car. So he came down and was like, okay, I want to shoot some of the racing going on at this Good Guys show. And like, you going to go get your camera? And he goes, you got it right here. He goes, for 80% of our stuff, like event coverage, especially racing, he goes, the phone's good enough. He goes, when I do features, I get the good stuff out, and that's how he can stay incognito. I think he has an extra lens or something that he goes on it.
Yeah, you snap on the front of your phone.
And I looked at the event coverage of that I knew he was shooting. I was like, it's kind of incredible. But digital kind of doesn't have that. Like, me and a buddy talk about that with all these bought and chassis companies. It's great if you've got the money, but it takes some of the heart and soul.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
The same thing, and some of the pictures, they're just putting it out. I mean,
I know exactly what you're saying.
Their features and stuff are all bitching, but their event coverage, then they don't have to drag around all that stuff all day long. So I get it,
I had a similar conversation, I'll just say, with somebody at Hot Rod a while back, where they were talking about shooting everything with their phone. And I said, I mean, we were arguing about it. And he said, well, it's good enough. And I said, so when is it okay for good enough?
Yeah.
To be good enough? Well, how did that happen?
Yeah. We have a good friend that he's been CMT video director of the year. He shot I don't know.
That's who I'm texting with right now because I have a meeting tomorrow.
Oh, okay.
Is at his place, so I'm not trying to be rude.
He was the first country guy at the Sphere in
Kenny
Vegas.
Chesney.
He shot all Kenny Chesney's video stuff.
Oh, wow.
So he's a big, like when the Nashville TV show was on, the record executive on the TV show, they modeled his office after our buddy Sean.
Oh, wow.
I mean, he shot all country that you can think of, but he shot rock and roll, Cleo, Three Doors Down, Sheryl Crow. I mean, but that industry is changing because he goes, they can get some college student with a phone to shoot a lower budget video because they just don't like their photo shoots. He goes, they don't spend $10 million on a video anymore. I mean,
Right.
MTV don't even play videos anymore.
Right.
Yeah, it's well, MTV's gone now, and you go, well,
Yeah.
what happened there? How
Yeah.
did you go? And it's a very good analogy for what's happened with Hot Rod. In fact, at one point, when I was at Source Centerlink, when we were in El Segundo, across the boulevard from us is Marvel Studios, and so I happened to see this program that was on television one night on History Channel or something about comic books, the history of comic books. And it was amazingly similar to the story of the history of car magazines. It was very similar stories and the very similar age groups and these waves of things of change. But
Mhm.
what they did was rather than stopping the comic book, they became graphic novels and they opened their own stores because they couldn't sell them at grocery stores or whatever, or the liquor store anymore, you know? And then they said, we've got so many good stories here, we should be in the film business. And I said, I asked at this one meeting at Source Cinema, because how many of you guys are the executives? Have you ever gone to see, did you ever see even The World's Fastest Indian? No. Okay. You don't have to like Bonneville. You don't have to like motorcycles. That movie's outstanding.
Right.
You'll love the movie. There's Mickey Thompson. There's the Barris brothers. There's, Ed Big Daddy Roth. There's a million bizarre stories out there. Von Dutch. But you tell people who Von Dutch really was, and I go, I see that every once in a while. I say, you shouldn't be wearing that hat.
Yeah.
And if you knew who he was, dude, I mean, I won't even go down that road. But they,
There's a
but there's,
documentary on Von Dutch clothing and all of that on Hulu. That's a pretty good
yeah, but
watch.
you just go, how come you have these stories? You have archives. Why don't you go down that road? Why,
Yeah.
it's,
And I'm one of them. I say that a lot. Like a lot of guys our age. Oh, you got to know hot rods from American Graffiti, Two Lane Blacktop, the first Vantage Point, and then the industry blew up in the early 2002 when the first Fast and Furious movie came out.
yeah.
I'll still watch that. I'm a hot rod guy, but I'll still watch that first Fast and Furious movie whenever it's on, and that blew up that industry.
Yeah.
To get the next blood of hot rodders and stuff that could help the magazine industry and all of that, Hollywood needs a good script to get the next spark again. I've got some ideas, and so does my buddy Sean. So it just
I thought about it too.
Done.
I've worked with Tim Allen a couple of times shooting his cars, and I thought, and I've never brought it up to him because I'm sure he gets inundated, and so does Jay Leno. Everybody thinks they got the next brilliant TV idea, but I always thought something similar in that, I don't know if you remember the TV show WKRP in Cincinnati. If you did a show like that was Hot Rod Magazine based in the 80s and do the whole thing with 80s nostalgia, the 80s styles, the 80s music, and the 80s, because the people, you wouldn't even have to make up characters, the people who were actually there. I mean, Marlon Davis, God bless his soul, he was a Hasidic Jew, and he was the most brilliant hot rod guy in his head. You'd say, I want to put this transmission with that engine and have it. I mean, he would know the part numbers for everything he needed to do. But he couldn't talk to a woman,
And then you said
And
on another thing that I heard you or read about you that some of that heyday of the magazines allegedly, we say allegedly a lot on here, so you can't get in trouble. Allegedly was like that TV series Mad Men that you said some of those magazine executives had secretaries, quote, that couldn't even type.
Oh yeah. Oh well. Yeah, I won't tell you who they were, but that was true.
That's fine. Yeah.
That was true. And there were girls that worked there that you go, well, what do you? I mean, okay, whatever. It's not my business, But I saw one getting a good fight with Gray Baskerville one time, but he let her have it because she had copy edited some copy of his right as it was going to shipping, to ship away, and that was always panic mode for 2 or 3 days. And she removed the words blown, injected, rear end. I mean, the balonies, a bunch of words that he would use talking about
Mhm.
cars, especially in gray zone slang, that she said,
Yeah.
I know what you're implying. I know what you're, I know
Oh,
what you're
Lord.
trying to say. And he just lost it, because she's like, what are you trying to say?
Yeah.
It was just common hot rod terminology, especially Baskerville terminology. But,
Yeah. But he had his
it
own
was,
language. That's what made him unique.
yeah, if
His
you had a
language.
Gray Baskerville character,
Yeah.
a Marlin character, there was,
Yeah.
I'll leave
In
the
the
names off
BMX
the list,
world,
but
it was BMX Action Magazine was the arc of the hot rod version of the BMX world. That guy, the publisher editor, had his own language and made up words and all of that
yeah,
stuff. He was
it was
that
like the
guy.
surf culture, there was
Yeah.
just
Mhm.
Yeah.
yeah, in a way of speaking. But, I mean, there was one guy there that was a little too, well, I won't even go into it, but there were a lot of characters there.
Yeah.
And if you
Yeah.
just said, okay, do these 5 guys and these 3 women as characters as WKRP in Cincinnati, but
Hmm.
I think that'd be a great television show. You would,
Yeah.
and the whole nostalgia about 80s and 90s right now, just lay into that hard and heavy. You'd
Well, you write it together. I'll put you duet with my buddy Sean. So yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
but we all have our dreams, but
Yeah.
it's a different, a different time, a different world. I'm so glad that I got to be a part of it when I got to be a part of it. I got to
Hmm.
drag, I met my wife. Well, it paid for my home and all that time with Ford Motor Company and doing so much for them and all that, and Chrysler and Jaguar and, the others, Jeep, that work that I got all came from working with Peterson. One
Hmm.
thing would, they'd call you because, hey, we saw this thing you did, or, we had started doing advertising supplements for Motor Trend and doing direct advertising projects for Ford Motor Company. And you worked your way in there and suddenly then Ford asks you, hey, can you do this directly for us rather than directly through Peterson? And things like that. It paid for our home here at the beach and paid for my wife and my
So
kids.
I
And
know your photo shoots are probably like kids, but do you have one favorite photo shoot? It can be hot rod, new cars, or whatever. I mean, you talk about Cadzilla, you talk to women. I mean, you have to say when you met your wife. I mean, you have to say those.
there you go.
That's a given.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
not,
So
that's a
throw
given.
that's
Oh,
given. So,
well, there,
I'm going to say this. I say that.
from a hot
I
rod
say
point
that
of
around
view,
a lot of my car friends.
yeah.
So there's a thing, the hashtag that I use. It's hot chicks with low standards. That's what it is. So.
Well, those aren't the ones I was chasing. Cadzilla, obviously from the world of hot rodding,
Mhm.
but when the Ford GT came and I got to be part of that, I felt like I, I always kept thinking, I want to be better. I want to be good enough to do this. I want to be good enough. I'd see photos and ads for Mercedes or whatever, whatever company that as a photographer, you went, whoa, how did they do that? And then you figure
And
out,
you were a fan of the GT40 because you said you rode
oh
one.
yeah, I had the slot cars when I was a kid, and
Yeah.
the Matchbox toys, and they were my favorite car as a kid. But so that was a big, and I mean, I mean, right there, the Beatnik Bandit being there. The first time I built Revell and AMT model kits incessantly
Hmm.
as a kid, you know, and when I got called by them to do model car kit boxes, I thought, well,
Hmm.
I mean, I've done Ford, I've done Jaguar, I'm going to do a Revell box. That to me too was,
Yeah.
this is
Right.
spectacular. I'm doing a
Yeah.
Revell box. Doesn't pay
Because
for
like me as a
crap, but
builder, we were close one time for getting one of our cars that we built for an oil company, Royal Purple, that sponsors our podcast. It was that close to being a Hot Wheels car.
oh yeah, yeah,
And
that would be a
I'm a
turn
Hot
on.
Wheels collector, so that would have been
Yeah,
a
Elwood,
cherry. Yeah.
from Mattel there, Larry Wood, he lives 2 blocks from us here.
Yeah.
And but one of them that really sticks out though too, as a shoot that was um, not life changing, but I mean the Cadzilla and the Ford GT are, like I say, two of the highlights. But when the new Mustang was coming in '04, there, we had, and then nobody can see them, and you can't, I mean, especially those, because they were such a gigantic leap from what the previous Mustang was, and nobody wanted to let it out of the bag that they were going retro. And the Mustang convertible concept car, this red one, I thought, well, we got to shoot it on the beach with, a girl with a surfboard, because that's what you did with red Mustang convertibles in 65. And so I did that, and the car could not be seen. We had police, we had to have firemen on site, well,
Mhm.
it's always the way. If you're on the sand, you got to have a fire truck. Don't ask me why. And all the insurance and you have to have X number of lifeguards on site in case you fall over and get wet, I guess. But we had all these people there, and we got this whole thing set up, and we're shooting, the Mustang GT convertible concept, big secret. And they're all keeping everybody away from us at the beach because we're paying for that chunk of the beach. This guy comes jogging down the beach, and he's in his trunks, and he's just splashing in the water, and I was like, oh well, whatever. And he runs past us, and as soon as he gets to where the car is, he darts up the beach, pulls a throwaway camera out of his trunks, and goes click click
Oh.
click click, and keeps running. And the cops take after him. We all take off. He's in his trunks running in the water. The cops are there in their black cop outfits and their boots,
Mhm.
and he's gone. Well, the next morning, those photos are all over the internet. They're
Mm.
everywhere. And I didn't know it yet, but I got a call from the guy that was the head of public affairs for Ford, who was not a friendly guy, read me the riot act, and you put the genie back in the bottle. I don't know how you're going to fix this, but you're going to fix it. And here's where it is. Here's where it is. Here's where it is online. Okay. Well, I said, does anybody call Jay Mays to tell him? You know, no, I'm not calling him. I'm not telling him, you know, and I said, well, I'll call him then because he needs to be alerted, you know. So he was much further up the food chain. So I called Jay back in Dearborn and said, this is what happened. And there was this moment of silence. And I was like, oh no. And he goes, bitchin'. And I knew he would always joke with me about, you're the only person I ever met that says that word bitchin'. He goes, that must be a California thing. And I said, bitchin'? And he goes, all that does is increases the buzz, Randy.
Mm.
And he goes, ah, fuck so and so, and I'll take care of him. And he said the car's still in my control right now, but those cars are scheduled by the day and by the hour who takes control of what and who's in charge of its whereabouts. And he said, so where do you think? What are the other traditional California places we should have a Mustang? He said, you've got the beach. And I said, well, I love the Sunset Strip, and that's pretty iconic. And the Whiskey a Go-Go looks like hell now, but what about? And he goes, "Ooh, I love the Rainbow." And I said, "Well, the Roxy's right next door. I love the Roxy." He goes, "You think you could get the Sunset Strip and shoot the cars on the?" And I said, "Jay, you know, you realize what you're talking movie stuff now. We're gonna have to shut down
Mhm.
Sunset Boulevard. We're gonna have to get cops. We're gonna have to get lighting that can be moved around with the cars out on Sunset Strip. There's going to be no such thing as crowd control." And also got to get the two clubs involved here. Said, well, what do you think it'll cost? I said, I wouldn't be surprised it cost 25 grand out of my pocket just to get the photos done. He goes, well, then get it done. And he was doing it directly to irritate those guys in public affairs, and so sure as hell, we got it done and we set it up. And, the Eyewitness News Team van is out there. The CBS News Team van is out there. Everybody, 1,000 people surrounding, the cops keeping them back on the street so they're not in the shot. And I had, 30-foot light boxes that are floated with helium that are tied to the cars with
Oh wow.
with fishing line, so you can move the cars around and the light is always perfect, and this
Mhm.
and that, we took over the clubs and paid for the clubs for the night, and I mean, it was like we're shooting freaking Jurassic Park out there on Sunset Strip, and the photos are okay. They're not the best thing I ever did, but it was one of the best nights I ever
Mm.
had shooting.
That's awesome.
That is awesome.
It was just
What's
such a
we've talked almost 2.5 hours here. I have a couple questions left. that I take notes when you say something.
We definitely have to do a part 2 for
What
sure. 'cause
is
that's
one
amazing.
like one quick horror story of a shoot that did not go well, did not go right?
You want me to bring back the prettier one than me to help tell that story or tell a story? I've had twice where
Okay.
people died on photo shoots, and
Oh.
one of
man.
one of them is alive to this day because of Stevie. You know, she saved his life. You want to come over,
Oh,
sweetheart?
wow.
Stevie? You want to talk about Tom Tompkins? We're doing the same thing, Mustang.
She's like, "Are you still talking?"
Oh yeah, she's used to it. She puts her earplugs in and it's like, oh, he never shuts up.
Well, I did have my earplugs in. What are we talking?
He said,
Now?
tell us a story of when things didn't go right.
Oh,
There's my son-in-law. He's film lighting and TV commercials and
this is
music
professional.
videos and
Yeah.
yeah.
Can we turn the backyard lights on? Sorry, guys.
What's going on?
Making burgers and.
Oh, he can't
Oh,
stand
yeah.
not having the lighting right.
And he's
So-
going,
Oh,
we've got burgers. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
anyway, sorry for we can cut that.
You've
whole-
had people die.
that whole 5 minutes
Yeah.
out.
You've had people die on
Twice.
set a
That's
couple.
right.
Yeah.
I told them.
Yeah.
So we're doing the Mustang. It's the same Mustang convertible. I think it was before we went to, maybe it was after. I think it was before we went to the beach. Again, the car can't be seen. Again, that photo will show up here at some point as well. But it's the same red convertible. So you got to have the pretty blonde and the red Ford Mustang convertible for the.
And it helps to have 2 paychecks in the family.
Yeah.
So,
Once again,
well,
I can
hey,
tell
I
it
know
for her
yeah.
as well. And it was a huge shoot, the car can't be seen. So I was using the Long Beach Convention Center because it's a beautiful building down there in Long Beach. And it has these huge banners that are really colorful banners out on the front.
And it was like 11 o'clock at night.
Well, it started at about 11 o'clock at
Yeah.
night, but setting up, but they couldn't have the car out there. And the building lights up beautifully. We had the car, which still had to be hidden. And, I probably had 20 guys there that night. And with, got big generators to run all the lights. We got all this and that going on. And it's a camera rig, which is, I don't know if you've ever seen people attach cameras to cars, but and people do little minor versions of that. The real version, it's made out of Kevlar and carbon fiber, and the rig costs about $75,000 to $100,000, and it extends 75 feet away from the car. And you have a crew that mounts this whole thing and bolts it to the undercarriage of the car, and then you extend it out from underneath the front or rear, whichever you're working. And you put a camera as high as you want or as far from the car as you want or whatever. And I climb up on a ladder, get my camera set, and get the car, get the background, everything beautiful. And then you have 2 or 3 guys squatting down as low as they can behind the car, and they push, at walking speed. And the car rolls along with the camera moving with it. So everything in the background blurs and it looks like you're going 80 miles an hour when it's nothing like that close to happening,
And I'm wearing white, and that's important to remember.
Yeah, she's it's pretty blonde with the top down. And so anyway, I'm up on this ladder and it's all dark around us. Now it's about 2 o'clock in the morning when we finally start getting shooting after getting set up and waiting for the streets to clear, and no people around. And so I up on the ladder and I've got this big generator off in the distance, these big tag-alongs and these big cables coming that are running all these lights. And I hear this bam, and then this breaking noise sound and somebody starts screaming. And I turn around and there's this guy laying face down and there's red, what I thought was blood running everywhere from him on the ground. And he's
Can I tell
and
him
this
my point of view?
okay, and this other guy that's with him just running back and forth, going, "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God!" It's
Yeah.
like, "Oh no," So go ahead.
Okay.
And
So
you're like mocked up
I'm-
as you're driving the car. You're in the car.
I'm
right?
Yeah,
as
she's
if I'm
faking.
speeding along,
Yeah.
going less than walking speed, right?
And I'm up on about a 10 or
And
12 foot
pretend
ladder.
like the wind is
you know.
blowing through my hair. And yeah. And I hear this, what he calls a bam, but I'm remembering it just being like bottles crushing and just kind of, you do go, ooh, that just didn't sound good. It sounded kind of like bones hitting cement, Yeah, exactly that feeling. And I thought, that didn't sound good, but why in the world are these car guys, and we know car guys will stare at an engine. Doesn't matter who the girl is, what she's wearing, but if a hood is open or a new car is there, they're going to stare at that car for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. And these are all car guys, and they're not looking at the car. Not that they're not looking at me, I mean, they're over it, but they're not looking at the car. And I'm going, what? Somebody didn't yell cut or what's going on? And I look up, and Randy is like on a ladder, and he has got his phone out, and I'm going, what? Nobody told me we were stopping. And I can hear him saying the guy is blue, he's not breathing, and I'm going, the flight
Well-
attendant kicked in, because I used to be a flight attendant like 12 years before this. And I go, it just kicked in. And I said, thinking I could see this guy way down. It was about a football field away. And I could see he was down. And I thought, by the time I get there, do my little, Baywatch run, that 911 will be there. But they weren't. But I'm volunteering. I'm going, well, I know CPR.
She, when like there's all these guys here and everybody heard it and turned. And I said, you call 911, you call the
Yeah.
police department, you call fire, you call, everybody start calling everybody. And,
They're all on
yeah, everybody's on their phones. And we ran over to this guy, and he's what I thought was blood, was some blood, but he was carrying a bag full of bottles of red wine,
Yeah.
and they had broken, and
Yeah, it
and that was part of all this red all over. But anyway, so we rolled him over, and he was bleeding because he'd hit his face so hard. But one of the guys came over, and before she had gotten there, and we rolled him over on his back, and he was swallowing his tongue and trying to tilt his head, and then he goes like this. I'd never seen somebody die before. And he goes, and he started
Yeah.
flopping like a fish.
Well, we
you know?
found out later that's called the death rattle.
Yeah,
And I'd never,
and I'd never seen
I
that.
thought it
It's like,
was,
what the
I,
is
when
this?
I,
And
when I
his
got there.
eyes rolled back in his head. He closed his eyes, and he turned as blue as the sky.
Yeah.
And his lips were blue. He was blue. And so I finally got through on my phone, and I'm yelling from 911, send an ambulance now. And they're going, how do you know he's dead? Are you a doctor? I mean, that's what they said. And I said, no, but he's blue. He's died. He's flopping, and he died. And he's not breathing. And now she comes running over, and she
And
got.
I thought it was like an attack, some kind of epileptic seizure, because I saw him doing the
The
death
flipping and
rattle
flopping.
too. I'd never
Yeah.
seen that or heard about that. And so when he stopped, I kind of go, and we breathe. And he didn't. I said, and you should be breathing. And he didn't. So I immediately went into like the CPR check, check for pulse, I even put my head on his chest to hear, because I didn't want to just make sure it wasn't just his artery. So, and I couldn't hear anything, and his chest wasn't going up and down. So I started,
All this happened in
everybody's going, come
seconds.
on, Stevie, you said you'd
Half-
do it.
half fast.
And I'm thinking, yeah, but 911's supposed to be here by now. I'm
Well-
just doing the Baywatch run. That was the big part, So anyways, I stomp on his chest, and I
It's pushing and
push, like 5 times, and then
down on him.
or 15 times, and then I breathe on him, and I just breathed into him, and then I went back, and I'm pushing, and I'm breathing, and I'm pushing and breathing, and this,
It hurt
and
his
then all of a sudden,
back, where she's pumping his
yeah,
chest.
and then
and pumping,
all of a sudden
you know.
I'm pushing, breathing, and then I go to breathe on him, and he just like, and his eyes
And
get
his
huge,
eyes got like.
and he just starts
wow.
But
breathing.
right as this
It
is
was
all
wonderful.
happening, I called, and the fire department pulled up, and the
Yeah.
paramedics and everybody. There's this huge stairway in front of the convention center there, and they're like, so there was probably 8 or 10 of them, but they're walking along like, hey, we're going to go get lunch, and this guy's dead,
Well, he
and
wasn't now.
yeah, but so they're just casual about it. So the guys, as they get to the top level where we are, he looks over and he sees Stevie working on this guy, and I was I was a little freaked out that she's working on this guy because it's like she's got his mouth locked on her mouth, and what is this guy? Who knows what's going on here? And his friend is freaking out, walking back and forth, and as the lead guy for the paramedics walks up, he goes, "How long is he been down?" And because we're doing all these a long exposure shots, I have a I always had a watch that had a stopwatch built into it. And so I happened to notice when it happened exactly what time it was. And he looked at me and he goes, "Well, how long has he been down?" And I said, about 3.5 minutes. And he goes, "You sure it's not 4 minutes?" And I said, I don't think so. He goes, "Are you sure? Are you sure it's not 5 minutes?" And I said, "God, like, get on this guy. Why are you asking me this?" And he goes, "Because if it's been 4 or 5 minutes, they're not going to want his back. His family's not going to want him back."
But they got
Oh,
And I
because the
was like,
lack of
good.
oxygen coming
yeah,
through.
you're like, "How cold?" And he goes,
Oh, they
"He's
suit.
going to have, this is what he said. He's going to have tapioca for brains." And I was like,
Oh.
"Whoa, this is harsh." But
Mm.
in the meantime, now the guy goes,
Well, yeah.
you know,
And so
and
anyways,
so
I introduced, and I wasn't an angel, even though I was wearing white.
So the other guy runs over to him and starts hitting him with the paddles, and they gave him oxygen and rip his shirt open and do the whole thing, and he's alive. And so she saved his life. And
No,
well,
no.
he got him breathing again. He was if nobody else had done anything, he'd have laid there dead and blue. And so ultimately
That's wild.
saved his life, and the city gave her a big commemorative hero plaque. They brought her in to do this big thing with the city and city hall. And they do this little scene, and with a couple of other firemen or policemen that had done some heroic things, and they
So
gave
then,
her.
like the other photo shoots you had with her in the future, were guys just randomly falling down so they could get mouth to mouth from her? Was that
Mouth to
Yeah,
mouth. Please
right,
come me and
right.
give me mouth to mouth.
But please don't hire her again, ever.
Yes, but then she's got this big like window box, and it's all triple matted and written in gold and this
We don't
commemorative
keep it
things. Yeah, we don't keep it up, but it's all big, beautiful thing. And rather than saying Stevie Lorentzen, it says Stephen Lorentzen. But
Whatever gets it right.
she, still hears from his name's Tom Tomlin.
Yes, he's had like 12 or 15 grandchildren.
Okay.
See, he wasn't even a
Contact her
grandfather
December
before.
8th, is it? Or
That's-
was it?
It
That's
was
awesome.
December 16th,
16th.
2004
Yeah.
happened. So
So here's
yeah.
every
Wow.
year, sends her flowers or a card or something.
Or a
and-
big case of wine
yeah,
or
yeah,
something.
and sit here and I saw another grandbaby this year because of you.
Yeah, yeah. So
Wow,
we
that's
connect at
awesome.
least once a year.
Yeah.
And he's good. Yeah, no tapioca
Still
for break.
tipping.
Awesome.
Anyways, that's our story. Okay,
That's
bye, you
awesome.
guys.
Thank you.
So I know as we need probably to wrap this up. Again, we could do a part 2 someday.
For sure.
What are you doing now? Working on the book, I think.
I'm it's a bigger project than I ever expected. It's another one of those don't know what you don't know things. I've worked on a million magazines, but I tore Achilles tendon a couple of years ago, and so I was down off my feet after having an operation and 6 months of not walking. And I have an airplane hangar I keep my film archives in because it just so damn much film and cabinets, and that doesn't even start to talk about the hard drives and everything else or the DVD piles. But just to get through the film is months, and to go through find the stories, or you find photos and you go, "Oh God, I forgot about this photo, but I remember this happened," and it's a story behind, so often behind them. But so I'm still working on it. Finally gotten through most of the film, and I'm through a good number of the DVDs, and I think I'm through all the hard drives now too. But so then I have to start, and I've done some of this with sample layouts and design work I want done, because that's something I do as well, and I'm going to be a problem to deal with for whatever publisher, because I'm not going to put up with just another ugly book with cars in it for a table. And this is the way I want it to look, and this is the sort of design I want. This is these are the cars that are important. And both and big stories. I mean, I'm sorry, big photos of great cars and a paragraph or two to tell the story of what happened with that one. And because there's a million
So I'm going to
stories.
place my order in now. I want a signed copy. I have a big
Yeah,
collection of books
and
and print
and
and signed stuff.
Yep.
So
I've talked to a lot of the guys and a lot of the builders, with Foose and some of the design guys back at Ford, and all everything in between there, and because one of the guys at Ford, when I was talking to him about it, he goes, and he was the head engineer for the Ford GT program. He goes, "Oh, I could tell some Randy stories," and I said, "You know what? That's a great idea." I said, you want to write stories for the book?" He goes, "Oh, in a minute, I could tell you." And I said, "You got a deal." And I thought, well, wait a minute, I should reach out to these people and let them
yeah.
tell their side of it. And so we've been doing that too.
Very cool.
So, and it'll be called I Shudder to Think, so we'll
Oh, cool.
see how that works.
Awesome.
Hopefully it'll
So
work.
are you still doing like you said you'd like to get back in with Hot Rod? Are you still doing shoots for corporations or magazines and stuff
Not
like that? Or
not much anymore. It's just, you know, like you said, the phone, or it's the same story with Ford, even on that level, we, used to get paid, whatever, 12, 15 grand to go do these photos. Are going to be a billboard or they're going to be on the side of a bus. Now all they need it to be is that big, and it only has to keep somebody's attention for 3 seconds, and then it
yeah,
registers, and so they don't pay that much money for those things anymore,
yeah,
and the problem is that there's a whole nother generation or two that have come into those positions within large corporations, and they don't know, uh, what sometimes I'll go into things and they'll say, and these photos were so great we had done, and I look at them and I go, God, you think that's great? It's great to you because you're used to seeing what everybody's done with their phones.
Right.
You don't even know what great or good is on some
hmm
levels, what can be done with photography. And I jokingly tell them, you don't always, you know, if- turn that little dial to manual on the camera, it changes everything. You put everything on
hmm
automatic, you're just the same as everybody else.
yeah, yeah.
So
Yep.
it's a different world. Luckily we got where we are, and had the good times that we had and had the opportunities. And I tell my kids all the time, I get hit by a bus tomorrow. Don't shed a tear, man. I got to do some amazing things for some. I never thought I was going to get a job after working at the skateboard factory. I didn't know what I
Yeah.
was going to do.
And a couple of years ago, you got nominated and voted in for the
Oh, and there you
Scarborough Dodge
go.
Custom
And one
Car
of
Hall
the
of Fame.
greatest honors of my life,
Yeah.
quite literally getting into the Hall of Fame. That another thing I would have never, I feel pretentious bringing that up, to be very honest with you. I just feel like, no, I can't be in this with those guys, those,
Yeah,
some of the
you'll have to
names.
come to one of the years to come to Lincoln, and the
I'd
museum's
love to.
incredible there. It's
I,
350,000 square feet. It's
Oh,
insane,
I'd
this
love to.
place. So
Absolutely love to see it. But to just even be a little corner footnote on a wall with some of the names that are on that wall, you got, the model car kits and slot cars that I built that those guys
yeah,
made,
yeah,
hmm
yeah.
that's a pretty thrilling thing, you know. Lucky
So
Very
guy.
cool.
as we wrap this up
hmm
for the podcast, who do you need to thank, and where can they, if they want to reach out or see some of your stuff? Because I know I don't have Facebook, but you post every once in a while on Instagram. So who do you
Yeah.
need to thank for some of your cool stuff in your career?
Facebook and Instagram are, the two biggest. And then excuse me, also have a website that I had up and running for quite some time, and I let it lag while I was doing I went to work for Celine, Steve Celine with Celine Mustangs for quite a time, and I'm back out of that and back
We
to
didn't even
doing
talk
what I
about
want to
that.
do. Yeah,
Part
yeah.
two.
Yeah,
Part
I've
two.
we'll
known
get that on part two.
I shot Steve's very first car for him for his very first magazine article. But anyway, so I'm back at my website. It's rottingrevolutions.com. And in fact, now that I've got family that can go, I don't need to hire this and this and this and this and this to do those
hmm
things anymore. It's all type it in and it happens, which has killed
I think
photography.
that's really cool that I didn't know that how much you kept it in the family, like how much you used your wife for other corporate gigs and the kids and all that. I think that's really cool.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, they those poor kids in more Ford advertisements with minivans or, I mean, all those things. So but
Yep.
they all got a paycheck. So it helped keep them fed,
Yep.
So we have been truly blessed. We're lucky folks.
Are you going to ask
Awesome.
him your normal 2 questions?
I will. So I have 2 questions,
This
and
is
they
going to be a
are
Barbara Walters moment here.
no. What is your favorite, and it doesn't even have to be car event, but what is your favorite event that you like to go to, and what is one that's on your bucket list?
Um, my favorite event that I like to go to is the Grand National Roadster Show,
Okay.
with AMBR and America's Most Beautiful Roadster. I just love that show every year.
Mhm.
Um, a bucket list event.
Mm-hmm.
It can be a concert, a surfing thing. It could be anything. You want to go to I've always wanted to go down to Florida and watch from the distance when they shoot a rocket in the air. I've always wanted to do that,
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, that would be a
Yeah.
great one. I'd love to do that. I mean, to have watched Artemis get launched, that would have been a turn on, you know.
Mhm.
Um, Other than that, that's a very good question. I'm going to have to bang my head against the wall a bit on that. Well, I love the Indy 500. I've only been to the Indy 500 once. I'd absolutely love to go to that again. Have you ever
We're
been?
going, and it will
Yep.
be mine 27th time, I think.
Yeah. We go
Oh,
every
really?
year.
Wow. How
Yeah, we
great
get
is
4
that?
tickets, second row. We renew them every year. We're taking a custom car buddy, Chris Ryan, this year. I always like to take somebody that's never been. We get 4
Yeah.
tickets every year, so maybe
Yeah.
we'll
Well,
bring you
yeah,
and
we'll
Stevie
bring
out
you
sometime.
Oh, I'd love to go. I
I don't
went.
have special passes. I don't have nothing like that. We just have front row right across from the scoring pylon. You sit in the sun most of the time. We sit we're second row, and the family in front of us, the lady, every year we hope to see grandma
Mm-hmm.
because
Oh,
she
you see
had,
the same folks even? Yeah.
Yep.
when the 100th anniversary, 7, 8 years ago now, you got a button on how many years you had been there.
Oh,
She
oh,
had been to 75 of them.
oh my God.
She
Wow.
went when she was 4 with her dad. We hugged
Yep.
the people.
Oh, how great is
They've
that?
had their seats. They've had them in the family since like the 50s or something like that. So yeah, it's really
Oh,
cool.
how great.
Still get a seat for grandpa that has passed
He's passed away. They
away.
leave.
And
Well,
yeah.
they got like 15 seats, and they leave one empty seat. And if some drunk guy tries to sit down, they defend that. They leave one empty seat for grandpa that's not with
Oh,
them.
wow, how great is that?
Awesome.
I went in '86 for Hot Rod when Bobby Rahal won, and the year it
Oh,
kept
nice.
getting rained out and rained out and rained out
You were
so I
there.
was there for 3 or 4 weeks. And Peterson had a condo there on the end of the track at between turns 1 and 2, so you had full facilities of that. And I met the let's just say became very close friends for 2 weeks or 3 weeks with the trophy girl. Yeah, before I met my wife. So that was a
This is why his wife was just out of the screen in
yeah,
earplugs.
Right?
yeah, and so that was a great trip on Hot Rod's Dollar and a beautiful hotel with the trophy girl and the Hot Rod condo at our disposal and place to hang out and Little John Butera was there and was racing with the Centerline car with the Chevy stock block that year, the one car that was
Yeah.
and then boom.
Well, speaking of him, just a weird little thing. He built that brown Model T.
Right.
His family that live in Indianapolis, so his widow and the granddaughter just got that car back like 2 weeks ago.
That's so cool.
It was
That's
at the
so
Roadster Show last year or year before, and now they have that in Katie, I think her name. She does
that's so
art
cool.
and jewelry. She was
I shot
cruising
it.
it the other day.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I shot his last car for him, that little track T that he built, and not too long
I have
before
a
he
bunch of
left
Little
us.
John stuff. There's a Little John car right there.
Yeah, I mean, he was incredible, I mean, I remember at Hot Rod when there's a whole nother set of stories, but when the photos came in of his 33 Willies, everybody said he made the wheels.
Yeah.
That was like, what? No, come on. No, he has this machine that carves a chunk of bullet. Like what? It
I
was.
remember standing next to that car. It's sad what happened to that car.
Yeah, it
That's a whole
is.
other story too. Seeing it, I think it was in the Goodyear tire booth or maybe Mr. Gasket booth, probably, right? Because with Joe Horedka's car at Good Guys Indy, and standing there and looking at that thing, I felt like I was looking at the space shuttle.
Oh, I
I mean,
know.
it was so far out of its realm. I just love that era of hot rodding, of the
Yeah.
imagination, when the billet started and the raw edges and stuff
Yeah.
like that. It's just,
It's
yeah.
funny when Boyd first had like or like Musselman's Roadster and that 3 window, the red ones. And I mean, I was, the cow look bug thing was so huge out here,
Mhm.
and all the dechroming, all this single color, and I thought, wow, I didn't know who Boyd was yet. Somebody's grabbed onto the cow look and applied it to hot rods. This is
Yeah,
cool,
yeah,
But yeah, those were the days.
yeah.
So I talked your ear off. Sorry.
No, this has been awesome.
Yeah, it's been great.
Absolutely awesome.
So we want to thank
Yep.
Hall of Famer Randy Lorentzen for being a
Oh.
guest on the Strange Motion Way podcast, and thank his beautiful wife for being part of it, and the kids for putting together this amazing
Display.
video. And
Yeah.
so we'll probably have to hit you up sometime for a part 3. You can think about all the stories you didn't tell us, and
Every time I
Uh,
start looking through the
maybe-
photos,
yeah.
Part 3, yeah.
yeah. Every time I look through photos, I go, "Oh God, I forgot to even mention this." There's
Yeah.
so many
Yeah.
crazy things. But thanks, you
Thanks for your
guys.
time tonight. It's been
Thank
awesome.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Oh, and I do want to say this is a record. We did almost 110 episodes. We have never had both cats hang out. That orange cat comes and goes. Seriously, so something the cats know. Some
like
people
They know I'm a cat guy
some
too.
people they love. Yeah.
Yeah.
I saw your yellow
Yeah.
kitty.
Yeah, his name is
Oh,
Mercury, and then the black and white one, he's right
Mercury.
over here. That is Axel.
Okay, let me see.
Yeah.
Where's Ringo?
Ringo, come here. Come here. And we have Winnie, who's
Yeah.
the dog.
And he's the golden retriever running around somewhere.
It's funny how they can tell just voices on
Oh,
who
yeah.
animal people are.
Winnie's been so quiet. It's like, oh my gosh. She
Did you
knows
put
where-
earplugs in the dog too?
No. Oh. Come here, Ringo. Oh, Winnie, give me,
Hi.
give me. Give me a ring.
This is Nikki, my daughter.
Say sorry.
Hello.
Hello.
You're the one that did the cool backdrop, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, all this in the
That's
square.
awesome.
Very cool.
She's
I wish I could
professional.
get you guys out here to sign my autograph board. I used to have that hang in the studio. So every builder and car exec I had sign the board.
I'll hit you up next time I'm in California.
Do that. Do that.
I was just a month ago. I was just in Del Mar.
Remotely. So if you ever want to do this, give me a call. All this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this is what she does for a
But
living.
yeah, I do this for a living.
Awesome.
So.
Oh, there we go.
Well, she sits there doing it for the TV with the Lakers,
Awesome. Awesome. Very cool.
Okay.
Thanks,
you
you
haven't
all.
had dinner, and neither have we. So we're
Yeah.
gonna go have dinner.
Yeah.
We'll talk to you later.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
in fact, Michael's barbecuing in the backyard now.
Nice.
Thanks, you guys.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
The Strange Motion Way podcast, brought to you by
Royal Purple, premium synthetic motor oils and high performance chemicals have been designed to improve performance, provide long term protection, and give you the confidence to push your vehicle to the limit. Royal Purple, premium synthetic motor oils.